Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the Development Committee of North Norfolk District Council on the Thursday 20th of January 2022. I'm Councillor Paul Heinrich. I'm chairing this meeting this morning. For those who are visiting, members are in front of me, the desks, officers to the left and to the right. I could ask officers to my left to introduce themselves, please.
Yeah, I'm Matt Stemrovich, Democratic Services, and she doesn't have a microphone, but we've got Lauren Gregory over here, Democratic Services as well.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Philip Rosen. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the Development Management and Major Projects Manager.
Thank you. Just usual basic housekeeping. Mobile phones should be off or on silent, please. We have no fire alarms planned for this morning, so if the bells go off, then it is for real, and you should vacate the building through the marked exits. Do not use the lifts and assemble on the car park or to the front of the building. I expect we'll be taking a coffee break around about 11. There's still members of the public here. There may be coffee available out in the foyer if that's been arranged. During any breaks, could I ask that members of the public do not speak to members of the committee? That would be lobbying and would put us in a very difficult position. I'm hoping we will not be proceeding beyond lunch. With 7 items on the agenda, that is always possible. Do we have any apologies and substitutes, Lauren?
Yeah, we have apologies from Councillors Pauline Grove-Jones, Councillor Peter Fisher, Councillor Clive Stockton, Councillor Liz Withington and Councillor Andreas Yassimi. We have substitutes attending Councillor John Rest, Councillor John Toy and Councillor Tim Adams.
Thank you. So we now move to the minutes of the meeting of Thursday, the 16th of December 2021. We can just go through those for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Are we content that they are an accurate record of the meeting? Okay, do we have any items of urgent business?
None received.
Thank you. Right, order of business. I note that we have a number of interested parties regarding item 7 in the room. And given that we are rather crowded in relation to the current COVID regulations, I think it's probably appropriate to get that item out of the way first. I only have one speaker notified there, but we will do that one first. So it's item 8. Sorry, apologies. I'm just looking at the running order in front of you. Yeah. So we will do that. Thank you for the correction. So if we could have the officer report, please. It's John is not. Is he there? Oh, sorry. My apologies. Declarations of interest. Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be speaking on item 8 as the ward member. Therefore, I'll not take part in debate or voting on this item.
Okay, my apologies again. Right, if we could.
I'm the ward member for 2 of the applications, but I will be speaking on behalf of them, but I've not predetermined, so I would like to take part in the debate as well. Thank you.
Right, let us.
Or just note we've got a hand over there.
Jeff.
Chairman, in relation to item 11 at Gunthorpe, just for record, my wife is the planning agent and she's been involved in that application, so I won't be taking part in any debate. I've not spoken to the applicant, I haven't met the applicant, but just I want to make sure that's clear.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. You're recorded. Okay. Tim.
Sorry, carrying on the trend. I similarly have called in 2 of the applications, so I won't be taking part in the debate. I will be speaking on the applications, but I obviously won't be voting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more? Trying to make this a difficult day for me. Okay, if we can move to item 14, tranche certificate of lawful development. I believe John, you. Yes, thank you. Could we have the report, please? Currently muted, John.
I think I'm off mute now, if you can hear me. Fantastic.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Before I start, I just want to say that there is a typo in the report. It should be Swayfield and Bradfield Parish Council and not Trunch Parish Council. So if members could make a note of that, that would be great. Thank you. This application is a certificate of lawfulness for the existing use of land for a station of Caravan. The location of the site is land east of Lincoln Cottage. If you can see the site itself in red there, it's just to the north of Common Road, and we have the red line which distinguishes the boundary of the site and where the houses are to the west. Looking at the site, this is looking west, and you see the Caravan there on the road on Common Road. This is looking within the site. You can see the vineyard there looking from the south. And this is just inside the site, just looking from the east. So the west. This is the site looking from the west of the site. The main issues of this application is that it's not a planning application. The application is for a certificate of lawfulness. So the determination is based on the evidence that has been submitted and not on planning policy. The main evidence that has been submitted by the applicants is a statutory declaration to say that the Caravan has been there for more than 10 years. And the main evidence is that we have aerial evidence from Google Maps, which shows the Caravan has been there since 2010. The recommendation, therefore, is to approve the lawful development certificate as evidence has been submitted that the Caravan has been there in excess of 10 years, and that evidence is summarised in the report in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a parish speaker notified, but not a name. If you'd like to come to the mic at the end there, you will have 3 minutes.
It's on there, it's red, right, okay. No, I'd rather stand up if that's okay. This is not a trunch application. Swayfield and Bradfield is a small community and has informed NNDC planning team of this encroachment of our open countryside for many years. In fact, it was escalated to a serious level 2 and 3 complaint to Nick Baker due to the lack of any definitive action being taken by the planning team. Residents applied to speak at this meeting but were refused. The parish council were not notified of this planning meeting and neither was our district councillor. First, this is not a simple small caravan. It is a fully fledged, large, static mobile home with mains, drainage and water connected, which can be utilised as a permanent home and arrived in 2019. This application is for a caravan, which has now grown and morphed into a permanent and extremely large static mobile home. The community paid privately for 2 highly qualified professional consultants to address and prove inconsistencies with the applicant's version of events which are incorrect and misleading. Both agreed that the applicant did not provide sufficient evidence to warrant approval. This provides clear proof and evidence, and without doubt, that the large static mobile home has not been in situ for the period stated, and which the officer observed in 2021. The applicant states that there has been a small caravan on the site for the last 10 years. However, the community has observed the small unit move frequently from site and periods when it was not in situ. There has been a determined and consistent effort by the applicant to conceal the small caravan from public view with the planting of large trees along the roadside. The community has reported this matter time and time again, and it is unacceptable that they have been ignored. The community has proven that there is reasonable doubt and therefore would urge the planning committee to stand up and support their local communities by refusing this application. This application should not be allowed. It is an erosion of our countryside, which NNDC has a duty to protect and enhance, and this is detrimental to our community. Swayfield and Bradfield is a non-development village. There are no new buildings within the village. The applicant has found a way of circumventing the planning system to ensure that they are able to secure some type of personal housing on this land. This should not be allowed. We asked the planning committee, how would you feel if this happened in your parish when you have been raising concerns to the planning team and been ignored? We are positive that you would be incandescent. Please do the right thing and refuse this application. Thank you.
Michael, I have no registered objecting speakers, no registered supporting speakers, albeit some certain people did apply but passed the deadline. Local member, I believe, is Councillor Hayman. Is he present? Do we have any written response from him?
Chairman, there were no further responses to the emails that, other than the emails that you've seen about making representations and speaking at the committee. We did speak at briefing, Chairman, and there was a suggestion you may take advice from the council solicitor before we enter debate.
I intend to. Noel, could you give us an explanation of the certificate of lawfulness, and could you also define the term caravan? To this, that's quite important. My understanding may not be the same as yours.
Thank you, Chair. It is unusual for a lawful development certificate application to come before the development committee, so it's important you understand the difference between the sorts of applications you normally deal with. This is not an application for planning permission, so you do not take into account whether it should be granted. The question is whether it has become lawful. So questions of planning policy, the material considerations, are not relevant to this consideration. It is a consideration of the factual evidence as to whether or not this application is lawful in planning terms. In this case, the application is for certification that a breach of planning control has been there for so long that it has become immune from enforcement. In this case, it requires proof of continuous breach for 10 years. The burden of proof is on the applicant. They must prove on the balance of probabilities their case. Just to put that into context to help you understand what the planning policy guidance says. It says the applicant is responsible for providing sufficient information to support an application. If a local planning authority has no evidence itself, nor from any others, to contradict or otherwise make the applicant's versions of events less than probable, there is no good reason to refuse the application, provided the applicant's evidence alone is sufficiently precise and unambiguous to justify the grant of a certificate on the balance of probability. So that is the question before you this morning. It's not should it get permission, it's is sufficient evidence there to show a continuous breach of planning control for a sufficient period of time. It's become immune for enforcement action. The council can no longer enforce against it and has become lawful for that reason. In relation to the second question, what is a caravan? It's a question that often troubles the council. There's a specific statutory definition, and there are specific parameters within which a structure adapted for human habitation must fit to fall within the statutory definition, or otherwise it is a very wide definition. So it encompasses mobile homes, it encompasses touring caravans, it encompasses camper vans. So it is a very wide definition, but there are maximum parameters establishing what is a caravan, and they're set out in legislation. Obviously, I don't have the information whether this is or is not a caravan for those statutory purposes, but there is a specific legal definition identifying what a caravan is, but that is a very wide definition. I hope that's of help, but I'm happy to take any further queries either now or during the course of debate.
Could you confirm then my understanding or no, that a touring caravan and the larger mobile home caravan are the same in legal terms for the determination of this certificate?
They both fall within the statutory definition of caravan. At least the potential mobile home can be bigger, so it can exceed the parameters. They both fall within the statutory definition of caravan. Whether they are the same for the purposes of this application is a different question, because you're looking to establish a continuous breach of planning control over a period of time. That may or may not have an impact on what is physically present on site.
That muddies it a little bit.
My apologies for that.
Okay, I think we're all aware we've also received communication by email with a range of evidence. So if I'm correct, it is for the applicant to prove the continuous use, not for objectors to prove otherwise. Thank you. On that basis, I throw it open to members. Councillor Tory.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions, which some may be for Officer Doran and others. However, I'll pose the questions. How long is a period of absence? Is a period of absence? Is it a week, a month, a year? I think we need to have some idea what's considered a period of absence that would break the chain, and also the current use and future use of the caravan. Is it residential, or does it fall under the limited use of 28 or 56 days that we've had this year, that people can move onto a piece of land and temporary accommodation? So I'd like to know those and answers to those two questions. What is the current or future use status of it, and how long is a period of absence? I don't know who can answer that for me.
I could pick up on the period of absence.
Thank you.
The requirement is continuous. It's continuous in a planning context. There may be, for example, if you're talking about residential use, if they're not there for a weekend or they go away for a holiday, that wouldn't be a break in the residential use. But if there is a substantial period, that would break the period of continuity, and it would then start again for a further 10 years if required.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope that helps in terms of context. I think in terms of potential future use, that's probably more a matter for the officer.
Okay. And so to the other question of what is the current use or future use, is it associated within the building? Is it just used temporarily on the land? I think I'd need to know that. Thank you. John.
Chairman, I suggest we take the case officer's representations first. Obviously, referring to the report, there is detail on the use of the caravan. So if we refer to John first, and then if there are any further questions arising, then obviously Jeff or I will pick them up.
Yeah, that's just in the report. It just says it's used to a tent of a small holding there. So that's the current use of the caravan. I think that's it. That's in the report.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I just wanted, I'm trying to establish what it establishes. If it's there for that purpose, if someone started to live there, is that enforceable or is that allowed? That's kind of the question that I'm trying to get to. So I understand its current use, but what would be wanted in the future if it was legally allowed to be there?
Chairman, the evidential case provided to the council so far is that this building, this structure, is part of a provision of shelter on the site for those who are working in and around the area. It is not proposed within the description and the detail to be of residential use. If it has been occupied permanently for residential use, then it is arguable and the enforcement team can investigate further complaints relating to residential use. The evidential base that we have, the officer's report, is based on the caravan acting as effectively a shelter for those working the land immediately adjacent. Thank you.
And just to follow on from that, in which case, were the use of that caravan to be changed to permanent residential use, in my view, that would be a material change of use for which planning permission would be required. And if it were to be done without planning permission, that would be enforceable action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason for those questions, I know that it's about whether it's been there or not is the thing that we're answering. But I think it was right that this committee addressed obviously the concerns of local residents, and that's why I wanted to clarify those points. So thank you for doing that. And so we know what potentially we can do for the future if it doesn't work out. However, what I now must say is I took some time looking on something called Google Earth Pro, which I use for doing, I use it for looking at archaeological evidence because it's quite good. It goes back quite a period. And whilst that's my reason for asking about the continuous use, it's one of those things that the satellites don't pass every hour. You've got gaps and sometimes you get several. But the evidence that I can see from there, that there has been a caravan on the site since 2006. Therefore, it fits the requirements. We've established that a caravan is a caravan. So I would have to support the officer's recommendation.
So you're proposing it?
I would, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Upon listening to Elaine Pugh's evidence, because that's what it is when you report it, she has mentioned that communication or contact had been made in under the 10 years, I would presume, for queries regarding the legality of the site being used for the caravan in the first place. Now, I know it's a long time, and I also realised that Mr. Elson wasn't then the Director of Planning. But it does concern me that there are possibilities that those queries have either not been answered, I do not say ignored, or they've been lost in the mix, which brings the validity of a continuous 10-year occupation into needing a review. Because if she, through local residents and through the parish councils, has voiced concerns and they have not been actioned, then how can this be a straightforward legal occupation or retention on the site? So I asked the question through you, Mr. Chairman, either to legal and to Mr. Rowson as well, see if there's any records of before he got into his position that corroborates the issues that have been put forward by Elaine Pugh. Thank you.
Officer Rowson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll say this, and I'll say it many times as I sit in this room with you as a group of members. You have an application that's determined on its material merits today. The evidence is the evidence. Whether or not the council has failed to enforce or has appropriately demurred from enforcement during that time period is not your decision today. Your decision is, has that caravan been on site for 10 years? Or alternatively, is there evidence that states that a caravan has been on site for 10 years and that the use of that land has been consistent over that 10-year period? Your decision today is not about enforcement failure. Your decision is about the material facts in front of you. And I very much regret to say, Chairman, that any failures enforcement-wise are not part of your decision today. I cannot really speak at length about the historic enforcement position. As I say, I wasn't in post at that time. However, the position is clearly you determine on the material information in front of you. You should not refuse on the basis that the council could have enforced earlier. Thank you.
Okay, anything to add?
Endorsing what Officer Rosen has said, the question is, has there been a continuous breach of planning control for 10 years? That continuous period can be interrupted by a period of non-planning control. It can be interrupted by the service of a formal enforcement notice by the council. That would then effectively stop the clock from ticking. But a complaint by third parties, by parish council, by members, is not of itself sufficient to interfere with that continuous period. And if no action has been taken, the evidence before you is of continuity of use.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, everybody. Councillor Pearce has actually raised the question that I was going to ask. I just wanted to clarify with the officer whether in preparing the report we know of any enforcement service of notices by the enforcement section previously that would have interrupted that period. I see that he's saying he's not aware.
No, I'm not aware, no.
Thank you for that. Therefore, I think we have to determine this today on the evidence that we have before us. And I listen with interest to what the head of planning has just said, and how unfortunate that may be for people who are concerned about this particular application, but nevertheless, it seems to me that our hands are somewhat tied.
Are you seconding the proposal?
Yes.
Yeah. As a holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I was just questioning the evidence provided, actually. Perhaps this would be through you to legal, as that exhibits C, D, E, etc. all seem to be indirect evidence rather than direct evidence, in that they're proving that the land was used for agricultural purposes, but not actually that a caravan was on the site. So it's one step away from proving the caravan was there. If you're saying the caravan was there for agricultural purposes, therefore if it was a field, therefore the caravan must have been there. So I don't quite understand the validity of those extra evidential documents. And I note that we've had a caravan observed on the site in various points in time, but not continuously. And I'm just have a question about the validity of that sort of evidence that's presented here. Thank you.
I'm afraid I have to defer to the officer on this. I've not reviewed the evidence personally. So it's a matter for the officer who's looked at the evidence, compiled it and come to his recommendation based on his assessment of that evidence.
Chairman, I would ask the case officer to speak on that matter. And again, if there are any uncertainties, I will then answer.
John.
Yeah, obviously the main part of the evidence is the statutory declaration by the applicant. And then I think the other main part of the evidence is the aerial photos across the time period. And then there's also sort of secondary sort of a weight of evidence related to what you just described as the exhibits A, B, and C, sort of add to the weight of evidence that the applicant has sort of provided. So yeah, that's all I can sort of say on that issue. Thanks.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Somewhat.
So if you wish to come in again.
No problem, Chairman. That's why I'm here. So the officer appears to be answering that, in essence, they are satisfied with the evidence that a caravan has been cited for a similar reason that was addressed by Councillor Toy and on the basis of the evidence within the application. In addition, I go back to the statement I made earlier on that there is a requirement for the management of this land to have a shelter there. And I believe that what the case officer is alluding to is that if the land was in an agricultural use, then there is a likelihood that the ancillary shelter would have been required to support the agricultural use that was occurring on site. So it is an ancillary element to the case. Thank you.
Could I just come back if the recommendation notes that it's been uninterrupted, which you seem to have determined, an unconcealed residential use. Where does use while working on the site and residential, which most people would laymen certainly would take as being living there, what is the difference in terms of determining this?
Again, I would refer to the case officer in the first instance, but my understanding of the evidential base is that it is effectively largely predicated on the basis of its use as a field shelter. To be in permanent residential use, you would have to be occupying the site on a regular basis. So it wouldn't be used on occasion for camping out. It wouldn't be used on, say, a daily basis for brewing tea and coffee, taking shelter from inclement weather, washing your hands, etc. So I would refer back to the case officer. My understanding is the evidential basis is primarily on its use as a shelter. And as you heard from the legal officer earlier on, then there may well be a material judgment to be made at a later stage as to whether or not the permanent residential use has occurred. So I'm going to address you back to the case officer on this matter, Chairman.
John.
Yes, it would be used as a use as a field shelter to service the small holding, and that is the difference between the use of the minute and any residential use in the future.
I find myself in a difficulty here. Will help me with it. We're talking about uninterrupted, unconcealed residential use. Yet what we're hearing is that it's being used as a field shelter, not residential in terms that most of us would understand. Could somebody clarify, please, either yourself or possibly Noel?
Yeah.
Chairman, if I can assist. On the basis of the evidence and what I'm hearing today, then I believe that the recommendation requires amendment. That what we're looking at here is the stationing of the caravan on site. And I go back to the description of development at the start of this report and the description of development within the planning application. It is for the siting of the caravan. What we can do is we can add an informative to the decision if members are minded to support today, which says that this caravan is located on this site for purposes of amenity as a shelter. It should not be construed as acquiring residential permission. That's the basis of the evidence and my understanding of the case so far. Now, that may require further consideration and monitoring should there be residential breaches occurring. You may wish to take further evidence from the parish council who have spoken on this matter, Chairman, but my understanding from the officer and from the information in this report is that this structure, this caravan, is located for amenity purposes, primarily as a shelter. And therefore, I would suggest the recommendation should be reading as amended to be serving for the stationing of the caravan as an amenity shelter and not for residential purposes.
Thank you, Officer Ryerson. Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. I have three areas of questioning. First of all, on the implications, if the application is approved or refused, presumably the applicant can submit a further application, and that course is open to them, either for another field shelter or another caravan or residential use. Just to clarify that point first of all.
it's open to the applicant to apply for what they want. They wouldn't be able to apply for a lawful development certificate without there being a suitable period of continuous breach of planning control. They can apply for planning permission for what they want, at which stage policy implications and material considerations will come into play.
Thank you for that. Secondly, I wanted to clarify whether the changes of use on the field over time between agricultural to dog agility, the changes in Caravan and the location of the Caravan on the site were material considerations.
Chairman, I appear to be answering questions this morning. There we are. I'll take that as an invitation to speak rather than you asking me to speak. The materiality of this is about the presence of a use on this parcel of land. Whether or not a caravan has been replaced, upgraded, etc., is a matter of fact and degree here. What we are persuaded of as officers is that this use has been consistent across the site for a period of 10 years as a shelter. Members, you'll be aware, caravans fade away. They don't last forever. They do require replacement. So it wouldn't be unusual in case law to find that a structure that has been on site for 10 years may have been replaced at one time or another. Your decision today, and it is a difficult one, I grant you that, Chairman, is for the members to look at the balance of probability assessment that the officers have given and the recommendation, to listen to what you've heard from the Parish Council and obviously what is available on the planning application portal here. As officers, we are persuaded that the replacement of the caravan and its upgrading do not constitute material reasons to refuse the certificate of lawfulness. We are content that within that balance of probabilities, within the scales of reasonableness, in this instance, it was appropriate to replace the caravan as has occurred on site.
Thank you. Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll come back to that.
Sorry, Tim. Officer Ralston's probably answered part of the question I was going to ask, was certainly to do with the condition of the current caravan, how old it is, and what the restrictions are on whether it can and cannot be replaced, and how often should this happen. But I do just want clarification, if you don't mind, on page 48, the fifth bullet point actually says, Exhibit 1 document illustrates the new static caravan. Now, do you mean a new van, or it's a new a site? This van has been put new onto this site, because the way I read it, it says it's new, but the photograph doesn't show it's new. And is there a life expectancy, as Officer Ralston said, on these kind of structures? Thank you.
Break the position on this item, Chairman, and I'll speak before the case officer on this case. I'm endeavouring to keep my mask on this morning. It's proving difficult. The position, Chairman, here is that what you're looking at is a lawfulness to cite a caravan on this site. So what you're looking at is a permanent position where the council are accepting that caravans, or caravan, I should say, let me be precise, that a caravan can be located on this site to act as an amenity shelter in this instance. So if in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time, the existing structure that's there requires replacement, then again, within tests of reasonableness, that structure can be replaced. So what you're looking at is the use of land, not whether or not you've got a tatty caravan or a good-looking caravan or something that is different to what was first on site. What you're looking at is the use of land and the balance of evidence and argument. What we will look at as officers who will enforce any decision that's made today is whether or not materially the use of that land is changing. So if we end up with a very different caravan that is being used abundantly clearly for permanent residential use, then we may argue that the materiality of that permission to use the land has changed. And that's the crux of this issue. It's the use of land, Chairman. Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you, Paul. I wanted to question something, in fact, that was raised by Officer Rowson previously. And it was obviously highlighted at the start of this item that it appears that Swayfield and Bradfield Combined Parish Council possibly weren't notified of the meeting, whether that was at all sufficient grounds for a deferral at this time to enable them to present evidence. I believe Officer Rowson did talk about whether further evidence from the parishes might be required. Thank you.
Through you, Chairman. My suggestion, Chairman, through your discretion, was whether or not you wished the parish to speak again as to the changes that had occurred to the caravans that have been located on this site. It wasn't a suggestion in any way, Chairman, to defer this item. I'm not the manager of the service that issues the notification to parish councils. I can speak very clearly, and I've advised you directly, Chairman, that this matter is hiding in plain sight on the council's website. The date of the committee is clear for anyone who views the application on the council's website. I understand that the Democratic Services team do issue notifications to parish councils. I can't speak as to whether or not the parish were notified on that issue. You would have to take advice from Democratic Services. My view, Chairman, is the parish council are here today. They're not encumbered. They have spoken. You may ask the parish council to address those issues relating to the changes in the caravan under your discretion, Chairman. I'm not asking you for deferral of the item.
Thank you. To be honest, I think the parish has been able to have a fair say, and we have had other evidence thrown at us. So I think we may well find us going around in circles. So I'm going to carry on for the moment. Go ahead, Parish.
Thank you, Chair. This is a difficult case, but the evidence that's put before us, I cannot see that the use of the field has any relevance to this application, and that there has been a caravan there as far as we can see for the required period. My only confusion was on page 49, the word residential, but I've been given some comfort by a lawyer that if a residential it became residential, then it would be a change of use and planning application would have to be submitted. So that gives me some comfort, and it clarifies the issue for me that this is a lawful occupation. Thank you.
We have had an amendment to that recommendation suggested by Officer Rowson, which would remove reference to residential.
That gives me comfort. Thank you.
And certainly I would feel more comfortable with that, as long as Councillor Todd's proposal would.
Yeah, I would accept that, Mr. Chairman. I think it would give clarity.
Councillor Brown, would you accept that amendment? In which case.
And I suggest the recommendation is amended to reflect the precise wording of the application, which is the existing use for land for the stationing of a caravan. I would suggest we add on top of that for amenity purposes for shelter. And we add an informative to any decision that this does not relate to permanent residential use.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak? Okay. We have proposer and seconder for the recommendation as amended. Move issue for residential use, which as ever desired would have to be the subject of full planning application. Allows the owner of the land to retain the caravan as a field shelter. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
4.
Councillor Holliday.
Against.
Councillor Heinrich.
4.
Councillor Kershaw.
4.
Councillor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
4.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Toy.
4.
And Councillor Varley. 4. That's 9, 4 and 3 against.
Thank you. So the certificate is approved, subject to the amendment that was made to prevent residential use. Thank you. Slog with that. We shall therefore move on, returning to the original running order. And we turn to agenda item 8. Banningham, PF 21-2507. And I believe Officer Rubin is starring on this one. Go ahead when you're ready, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. This is item 8 on the agenda, which is application reference PF 21-2507. The application proposes the erection of a 2-storey detached dwelling with detached single garage and carport to front, with widening and improvements to the vehicular access at Watts Cottage, 2 Mill Road, Banningham. The officer report can be found on pages 9 to 16 of the report pack, along with the accompanying presentation slides. In terms of principle, the site does comprise of a largely overgrown parcel of land adjacent to Watts Cottage, presently accommodating a disused railway carriage. The site was subject of a previous application for a 2-storey dwelling under PF 201771, which was refused at Development Committee on the 11th of January 2021, in being contrary to policies SS1, SS2, EN4 and CT5 and paragraphs 78 and 79 of the NPPF. In regards to the current application, covering the matter of design first of all, it is considered that the design now proposed is an improvement upon the previously refused scheme, in being sited in a better position within the plot and with a better relationship to neighbouring properties, along with reducing the overall sense of bulk and incorporating a refreshingly modern design aesthetic. For these reasons, there are now no objections to the proposed development on the grounds of design under policy EN4. As part of the package, the railway carriage would be relocated to the rear of the site to serve as a garden room, whilst the existing cottage would also be refurbished. Notwithstanding the improvements in design, the proposed development does remain unacceptable in respect of strategic policies SS1 and SS2 and indeed SS4. It remains the view, as previously concluded at Development Committee, that the site is in an unsustainable location. There are no services or facilities within close proximity to the development site, and with a lack of any footpaths or regular public transport links to such services, further noting the lack of any street lighting. As such, inevitable reliance will be placed on use of private car to meet basic day-to-day needs. With a lack of basic facilities and transportation options, it is considered that a single dwelling in this location would represent an unsustainable form of development. Paragraph 79 of the NPPF states that proposals for new housing in rural areas should be located in sustainable locations where it will enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities, an approach which current adopted core strategy policies follow. Given the lack of a basic level of local services and facilities, it is not considered that a single dwelling in a location proposed would contribute enough to maintaining or enhancing the vitality of the local rural community, and as such would not comply with the requirements of paragraph 79 of the NPPF, nor fulfil the requirements as set out in paragraph 80. Turning to highways matters, as before, the Highways Authority have maintained their objection to the proposed development on the basis of the road and the junction with the B1145 described as being severely substandard, particularly with regards to visibility in both directions at the junction and with no possibility of sustained improvement. Use of the road and junction would increase as a result of the new development through additional daily movements to and from the site. However, it is acknowledged that since receipt of the highway objection, the applicant and agent have gone to great lengths to try and improve the junction visibility through the cutting back of existing hedges, having liaised with the corresponding landowners either side of the junction to achieve this. And it is accepted that these improvements have indeed improved visibility. Since the writing of this report, the agent has provided a letter from a local farming company stating that they are tasked every year by the owner of the hedges to cut it back. However, the Highway Authority have noted this, but have again maintained their objection, as these improvements cannot be provided in perpetuity, as the applicant does not own the land subject of the improvements. So there is no guarantee that these improvements can be retained in future. This being the case, the objection remains under policy CT5 of the core strategy. Overall, to conclude, the officer recommendation is again one of refusal for the reasons as stated on pages 14 and 15 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have a member of Colby and Banningham Parish Council. Assume that is good self.
Good morning. The Parish Council considers that the architect and his clients have addressed the design concerns and sustainability issues voiced in respect of previous designs to the extent that paragraphs 79 and 80 of the NPPF outweigh policies SS1, 2 and 4. Highways, as you've heard, have maintained their objections based on the inadequacy of Mill Road, in particular its junction with the B1145, citing it as woefully short of government requirements and with non-compliant visibility displays for the 40-mile-per-hour speed limit on the B1145. With the cooperation of landowners, visibility at the junction has been improved by attention to the hedges on either side. As you've heard, Highways do not consider this as overcome the objection because the improvements cannot be guaranteed as the applicants don't own the land. Highways also considered that public money should not be spent on improvements to the junction for the personal benefit of the applicant. Surely, any improvements to a public road would be for public benefit. With regard to vehicle movements, the council feels that the effect would be negligible and is difficult to quantify, since the number of vehicle movements can be affected by changes in property ownership. The other point is the perceived isolated location. The B1145 effectively splits Banningham into two parts. Mill Road residents do have access to public transport as the Sanders 18 service operates on the B1145 between North Walsham and Aylsham, two market towns with good facilities. Colby School, a consistently highly rated primary school, is within walking distance, with the village hall, church and other parish amenities within easy reach. Landscape and environmental officers felt that the proposals fulfilled the requirements of policies EN2 and EN13, as it would be positioned between existing properties and therefore seen within the context of a small built-up area. The Parish Council remains of the opinion that the proposed new dwelling and the later proposed renovation of the existing cottage would be a positive contribution to the village. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no objecting speakers. One supporting speaker, Mr. Paul Harris.
Good morning, everyone. Due to time limitations, our brief response to the officer's report are as follows. Policy CT5. The highways objection on the grounds of highway safety concerns the substandard vision displays and an increase in traffic flow at the road junction almost 100 metres away from the application site. We have provided empirical evidence on recorded accidents in the area over the last 22 years, which confirmed that no accidents occurring at the junction. The only accidents recorded being more than 100 metres from the junction along the B1145. Our clients, together with the support of the Banningham community, arranged for the hedges to be cut back to improve the junction visibility, and written confirmation has been issued advising these hedges will continue to be cut back as part of the parish-wide hedge maintenance. We contend that this objection should not stand in the way of any approval for the reasons stated in our application correspondence. Policy SS4. This policy was added to the report and had not been raised or discussed previously, and focuses on a single element, specifically the carbon emissions and the need for the use of private transport due to the village location, but fails to acknowledge the extensive commitment our clients have made to building a sensitive, environmentally sustainable and positive design, but time forbids detailed description of this. We contend that the proposal conforms to the overriding principles stated in Policy SS4, and as such, the application should not be reviewed on this basis. Policies SS1 and 2. These policies determine a blanket refusal for any applications for dwellings other than affordable outside designated areas of the district, classifying the remaining areas as countryside. We contend that these policies inadvertently condemn non-designated areas to slow decline and the loss of vitality and potential for rejuvenation, and know that these policies have been tested at appeal and overruled on occasion. We believe that the application can and should be viewed as being in accordance with the overriding principles of NPPF 2021 regarding housing in the countryside for the reasons stated in the application. The design is unique for the area and would be a small-scale landmark property and be an outstanding contribution to an improvement of the quality of design in the district, together with upholding the aspirations stated in the NNDC design guide with reference to paragraph 79 development. The property does not stand alone in the countryside, but utilises a redundant and dilapidated part of an existing dwelling site and continues the line of properties along Mill Road. Finally, we believe that we have provided sufficient information.
Thank you. Right, now move to local member, Councillor John Tory.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try and rattle through this. I've got quite a bit to say and just my usual 5 minutes. So if this had been in Itteringham, Wickmere, Bessingham, Hanworth, which are all within my ward, I would not be supporting it as I do. The real issue here is about sustainability and the quality of the building. In terms of sustainability, as we've heard from the parish clerk, there is a bus route there. I spoke to Sanders yesterday, 5 times a day, hail and ride at the end of the road, short walk. This also goes into the village and connects into the main part of the village. And not only does it go to Aylsham, it continues on through Erpingham, sports facilities, Aldborough, doctors, garage, shop, and on into Cromer. So there's quite good links both to, as you've heard, North Horsham, Aylsham, and now into Cromer. How many people here came here today by public transport? How many people in the industrial areas here came by public transport? We're in a sustainable area. There's shops here. Just 2 supermarkets down the road. Who came by public transport? Nobody, because there isn't any. You cannot catch a bus to the council where people need to come for our services, but these people can catch a bus to facilities. So it is sustainable. At the end of Mill Road, there is also the Weaver's Way, which has recently been resurfaced. It's an old railway line. It's easy cycling and walking to Aylsham and North Horsham. There is a route where if you go around the back of some of the houses, which crosses in a different part of the road onto a trod path, which you can then walk into the rest of Banningham and to the school. It is sustainable. The building is sustainable. The reuse of products, recycling, its energy efficiency, and the way it's designed. It is a good quality design, which has been approved by 2 meetings that went on in the parish council. So I think the question of sustainability, people are going to jump into cars. I've had meetings this week in other parishes where people want paths they can use all year round. People are doing it. It has changed. and people will know how much I use my bike to go around my ward, and I do that day and night. So I think the question of sustainability needs to be changed. You know, I just think the balance is not right for this particular premises. Now, we have the junction at the end of the road. We've had instances in this committee where we were not allowed to consider the case of sewage running down the road because it's already happening. This is a junction that people are saying is dangerous. It's dangerous whether we build this building or not. It's not relevant to this application. The only relevance is the space into Mill Road. Now, how many junctions do we go down the road and say it's dangerous? Do we say it's dangerous getting onto the A140 from the 1145? You know, how far do we go? So I hope those that we've dismissed. Bits that were addressed quite lightly within the officer's report is about the 79 and 80. 79, to expand it a bit, it says to promote sustainable development in rural areas, housing should be located where it will enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities. Planning policy should identify opportunities to village to grow and thrive, especially where this will support local services. Where there are groups of smaller settlements, developments in one village may support the service in villages nearby. And I've explained how they're connected through public transport. 80 at E, subparagraph E, the design is of exceptional quality in that it is truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, and would help to raise the standards of design more generally in rural areas and would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to defining characteristics of the local area. We've talked about the design, that it's acceptable. We know it's environmentally good from the information that's been given to us. And finally, if I've got just short of a minute, self-build and custom build, which we do not have enough space, but it's a big part. It's there's roughly 13,000 houses currently done by self-build, custom build. And there was a report done recently commissioned by the Prime Minister and done by Richard Bacon MP. And if I can just read this last bit, just looking at timing. Gap has opened up between the places we want to see and those we actually create. Instead of beauty and a natural order, we see a sterile sameness almost everywhere we look. Rather than an architecture displaying a rich array of local vernaculars, we can celebrate and honour, crafting using traditional materials and skills with a distinctive sense of place, and even become a way of affirming identity and belonging. We see instead a crushing of imagination with houses designed by accountants. We are failing to create the listing buildings of tomorrow. My time's up, Mr. Chairman. I'd love to spend more, but thank you.
I'm sure you can speak for another 10 minutes on this one. Okay, thank you. Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. I am familiar with this site. I live just down the road from this site and have done for 30 years. The junction has always been an issue, but it's been very refreshing to see that the hedges have been cut back and the display is far better than it has been since I moved up here 30 years ago. To my knowledge, there's never been a crash at the end of Mill Lane, as reported. Regarding SS1, SS2, and knowing this site very well, I mean, the site at the moment is an eyesore, and this building I would regard as infill rather than building the countryside. I'm heartened to see the sustainability aspects of this house and think that this house would be an addition to the structure, and the parish council support it. And it's also interesting to see that this is a young family moving into the area near a school, which is walking distance. From that point of view, it is sustainable. And what my colleague here didn't mention, that there is a shop in Felmingham, which is just a mile down the road as well, which can be got to by bus. I can't see a reason why this shouldn't be approved rather than refused. I think it's an addition. It's a very good looking building. It's sustainable and it's infill, and it's turning what was an eyesore into a very nice house. And the actions taken by the applicants to help with the display, I think, is commendable. Highways could say that about any road that trees could grow, that there's no guarantee that farmers cut them back. And where we live in this particular part of Norfolk, that happens. So to see people take responsibility for their actions is an improvement as far as I can see. So I'll be voting against the recommendation. I would like to see this one approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
I am also persuaded by the arguments of the local member and the parish council, and I would propose that we don't accept the recommendation and do approve the application, citing sustainability and good design. Thank you.
Thank you. We would need to vote down the actual recommendation and then return with a further recommendation. Councillor Lloyd.
Yeah, I'd just like to lodge my support for this application as well. I don't think always we get enough information on the environmental design issues that these buildings actually are going to bring to the area. Buildings like this, from what I can see from the drawings, there are some drawings of some cavities and flooring. Very difficult to see from the drawings, but I can understand what's going on there. We should be encouraging developers to introduce these into our area. These are very low carbon properties when they're built. I'm not going to repeat the arguments that were eloquently made by Councillor Toy, but I agree with them. And I, like the previous two speakers, I know this area very well. I've walked to Aylsham from North Walsham many, many times. It is well connected. One thing I'd like to pick up on page 15, and it's often said in these committees, is the argument that car use adds to the detracts from sustainability. There's nowadays, in this day and age, in 2022, we should be saying fossil fuel cars, not any car. These could be electric cars and have no impact on sustainability whatsoever. So we need to start thinking about these distinctions when these papers come before us. It's not a criticism of the officer. I think they do a great job and it's a good report, but I've said my bit. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman. Just really to agree with both the parish councillor and the other members that have spoken. I'm in total support of this. I find rather disturbing one point on page 10, which is the second paragraph, first bullet point. And it says that Mill Road is not suitable for heavy construction vehicles associated with construction. Well, it's only going to happen once. Once they built it, there won't be any more construction. So you can't put that in as saying, well, you can't build there because you can't get there. That is down to the construction people to make those plans. These days, that's how they work around it. So I will be voting against the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like clarity. And I also believe in adherence to policies. I note that the officer's report says it's against SS1, SS2, SS4, etc. But the arguments today are a clear statement of reasons why we should go ahead with this, despite the previous refusal. So therefore, although it's going against policies, I think a common sense approach has been put forward and it's clear, unlike the previous application, it won't go back there anymore. But the point is, if I'm looking at it as a policy, it would very likely be no. But listening to the members, listening to the arguments for, we have a concise and clear reasons package why we should go. If we have to, not have to, if we will be going against policy. So why will we be going against policy and the officer's recommendation? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Officer Rice.
Chairman, it appears we're reaching the end of debate, so if I can perhaps offer some thoughts and advice to members in making a decision today. We must look at policies SS1 and SS2 in the most robust manner. We should only depart from our locational strategies where there is an exceptional reason to do so. This proposal is a departure from those policies. It does not comply with our locational strategies. Looking at the issues surrounding the accessibility to services and facilities, members may be persuaded by the arguments you've heard today. There are some areas in our district where on occasion, the strategic assessment of development across the district under our local plan may miss some issues and some opportunities. What that should not do is it should not lead towards a wider assumption that a particular location is sustainable. It is part of a wider basket of considerations. My concern here is that a decision on a single application at Banningham may confer that the wider settlement is otherwise sustainable. Clearly, our existing local plan does not consider that to be so. The emerging local plan does not consider that to be the case either. It is not appearing as a smaller settlement. I will leave members to make your decision on the basis of access to facilities and services. That element must be clearly articulated in any decision that is made. Moving on to the issue of car journeys. The guidance is clear. We've had electric cars for a considerable length of time, Chairman. Car journeys of any type, in whatever vehicle you are using, are considered to be unsustainable. Fuel, charging, is consumed by those journeys. So any location which is dependent on the use of a private car remains unsustainable. Our planning policies are clearly geared, Chairman, to deliver no further burdens from greater car use. We aim to be more sustainable. So when you consider new car use, members, you should look very carefully at any proposal that is otherwise car dependent. There is some discussion about the matter of highway safety. There's been very careful consideration on this matter by the applicant. They've entered into agreements to cut the hedgerows back to improve visibility. You can see the county highways engineer is not convinced that this can be delivered in perpetuity. It is in your gift, members, today to consider whether or not the improvements that have been offered by this applicant can be secured in perpetuity. Should they, for example, be subject to a legal agreement with adjacent landowners or the use of an appropriate Grampian style condition. Clearly, officers are not convinced that that will be deliverable in perpetuity. It is for you, members, to make this difficult decision. Moving forward then, members, we look at paragraph 79 and 80 of the MPPF. Again, members, balanced considerations. You will decide today where we set the bar in terms of extraordinary criteria for design. Officers are not convinced that despite the efforts on design and the clear improvements in this process, that this proposal will meet the requirements of paragraph 79. You have heard members, one member has spoken about the need for infill development, where you may see development appearing in the countryside in otherwise sustainable locations. Chairman, that is the set of issues that members are required to balance and discuss in this decision. This is not an easy decision, particularly in the light of a previous refusal. It is a difficult decision. Officers are pleased to assist. However, Chairman, it is a decision that will need to be made today on the balance of argument, the planning balance over those issues that are identified in debate today and in the officers' report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further member comment? Okay. Yes, Councillor.
If I just may clarify a couple of things. I know that we have had an email during the course of this week from the agent about the absence of a reference to policy SS4 in the previous application which came to this committee, which I was a member of in January last year, which is unfortunate. I actually looked back at the previous planning application, and a list of policies had been removed from the officer's report. But I just want to make it clear that due regard was given to the environment policy in SS4 during the debate last January. So I think the point that the agent has raised to some extent falls away in that regard. I just want to refer to page 14, second line of the paragraph under the recommendation. It refers to policy H09, which I read from the strapline in the policy and the core strategies: conversion and reuse of rural buildings as dwellings. Is that a correct reference? Because I'm struggling to see the relevance of HO9 to this application. Could I just ask the officer to explain that?
Officer Rubin?
Yeah, no, policy HO9 doesn't have any relevance to the application at hand. This is for a new build dwelling. As you correctly say, policy HO9 is for the conversion of existing buildings to dwellings. I'm not seeing the reference on page 14, but I may well have missed it. But just to clarify on that point, no, policy HO9 is not a consideration.
Thank you. Could I just ask, I've got you there, Colin, has that old railway carriage, a lot in the 30s and 40s in Norfolk, ever been used for residential accommodation?
It's not been used as separate residential accommodation. Our understanding that it was used as part of the existing cottage as, I suppose, ancillary overspill accommodation, an extra room, so to speak, or for storage purposes. But no, it's not been used as a separate permanent dwelling at all.
Thank you. Oh,
I think we should pay great heed to the highways comments. Actually, Norfolk roads are very unsafe, and if we start, not taking any notice of what they're saying, I think that's putting us in a dangerous position. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Chairman, I hate to add to what I said earlier on, but you will recall, members, those of you who sat in our last meeting, the highway engineer spoke at some length about the matter of traffic accident statistics. To paraphrase what he said at that meeting, for those of you who weren't here, he said that because there is no accident at a junction does not make that junction safe. It does mean that there is, in terms of the highways assessment, a risk of an accident at that junction. Now, members, you will make your decisions today, but you have clear advice from the County Highways team that there is a risk associated with this junction. You've also heard from me that visibility improvements can be potentially secured with the applicant. However, members, the advice from the Highways officer is very clear. There is a risk at this junction, and that risk should be listened to very carefully, and accident statistics in their own right do not mean there won't be an accident this afternoon, tomorrow, or the middle of next week. So that was the advice you were given at the last meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. However, I think, knowing that road extremely well, many of our rural roads, there are many dangerous junctions and bends on our roads. The Aylsham Road might be particularly notorious, but it is common. It is a matter of judgment, I think. Okay, we have a recommendation, but I have no proposer and seconder. If we're going to move forward, that would help. If you're minded to approve it rather than refuse, we need to vote this down first. So Noel can advise further on that.
If it's of any assistance in the rules of debate and the Constitution, Rule 17.5 does deem the possibility of officers' reports being deemed to have been proposed and seconded. And so, with your discretion, a vote can be taken on the deeming of the proposing and seconding of the officer's recommendation, following which a further proposal and seconding can be made if necessary.
Thank you. In that case, I would deem it to have been so proposed and seconded. So we'll go to a roll call vote on the recommendation in front of us, which is for refusal.
Okay, on the officer's recommendation then, Councillor Tim Adams. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
For.
Councillor Holliday.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Kershaw.
Against.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Toy. Sorry, are you excused from voting?
Yeah, I'm excused from voting.
Apologies,
I'm pretty predisposed. Thank you.
Councillor Varley.
Against.
Okay, so that's 7 against and 4 for.
Okay, the motion to refuse is therefore fallen. We now land ourselves a problem we had a couple of weeks back. If we are to put, somebody wishes to put forward a recommendation to accept, then they will need to clearly state the material planning reasons why the alternative decision is being made, and those will be minuted. The proposer needs to state the condition and its reason or refusal reason, any other basis. So we need a clear proposal and the grounds for that acceptance.
I would propose to accept this under, it does fulfill EN4 and sustainability aspects. So that would be my planning reason for approving this application.
Is that an acceptable proposal in your planning terms, Sir Rouse? Yeah, I'll ask you.
Okay, as I listened to what was said a moment ago, there was reference to this being in accordance with the development plan policy EN4. Clearly, that's not considered to be the case. Officers have made the position that this is a departure, a grant of approval would be a departure from your development plan policies. So it's about setting out the reasons for that departure. What are the reasons why this development is departing from the development plan? That's the bit that we need to articulate as a committee.
So, Chair, if I may, in that case, then I would say it actually falls under paras 79 and 80. I think on that basis, it is. Those are my reasons. Paras 79 and 80 of our policy guide.
Yeah, I know that the report states that it is compliant with EN4, so it was, I think, valid. So you are proposing on that basis. Thank you. Councillor Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm more than happy to second this. I believe that there are limited facilities, so this would be considered to some extent sustainable. Thank you.
Okay.
I was going to second it on the principle of fact there is also already buildings on the site, so therefore it's not new development. It is a redevelopment or whatever. I know there's new building going on there, but the site was already occupied. And I also take into account what you said, Mr. Chairman, about, and everybody else, including Officer Rowson, about the state of our junctions on the roads in this beautiful county of ours. There's a lot of junctions that are very dangerous, and we have to negate the risk of an accident against the risk of usage. So I think, bearing in mind what Richard said and Andrew about the other policies, shall we say, variances, I'd like to put those forward that we do take an account of what highways say, but I think it's perfectly safe with sensible usage against the amount of risk that's there. But also this is, which you might call infill, whatever you want to call it, it's not a wholly new development, as it's already accessed and it's already lived upon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would suggest that if we are to take that, we should also include allowing officers, Sir Rowson in particular, to impose such conditions that are felt necessary. Would that be appropriate?
Chairman, I would say that conditions in this matter to allow a departure are actually really rather important, and to throw a blanket over them and say that they should be just agreed with the officers afterwards in this remarkable circumstance, I think is possibly not an appropriate approach to take. We set departures rarely. When we do so, we should be very clear as to why we are departing. Having listened to the debate here, what I see is a circumstance where members are persuaded that there is a strength to the design of this property. There is a consideration that it is a form of infill development. The matters of sustainable development in terms of the offers made in terms of energy efficiency for this proposal may be an area you may also consider a condition to be employed on. Critically, we have a difference of opinion with the highways officer. We need to be very, very clear when we depart from highways opinion and advice why we're doing that. Respectfully, Chairman, that's not because we've got a few dangerous junctions in our district. We need a clear reason to depart. Here, the applicant provides you with an opportunity to consider their retention in perpetuity of the treatment to the hedgerows, the cutting back of hedgerows. I would say that that would be extremely important and material to the consideration of this application. Whether or not that is secured ideally through the use of a unilateral agreement or a section 106 about the treatment of those accesses is a matter for members to consider. I would heavily recommend members that you consider the use of a Grampian style condition to ensure that if this building is brought forward, you can point to highway safety betterment in the treatment of those junctions. The applicants have very clearly said they will use their best endeavours to provide that. I feel that that is extremely important as a reason to depart from the highways advice. Otherwise, Chairman, you may consider that the junction is not dangerous. However, I believe that that would be a dangerous route to take. So I suggest you use appropriate conditions along with the standard use of conditions for materials, drainage, siting and layout.
So you are therefore suggesting that a condition should be that there is a written agreement as part of the conditions for the maintenance of those hedgerows.
I think it's important that the proposer is clear as to the areas that they intend the conditions to cover when going through with this departure. I've given some advice in that short address to you, Chairman, but I would suggest we need to know the areas that the proposer wants to impose conditions on. We can then deal with those areas appropriately through yourself, Chairman, and with the applicant to deliver appropriately styled conditions which are deliverable and legal. What I would be careful of is offering a departure without the recommendation of the areas at the very least that the condition should cover.
Councillor Kershaw.
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible move. I don't know if we can agree that today, if the applicants are here or the architects would enter into that, but I think that's a very sensible resolution that the applicants have shown willing and have entered into agreements. I can't see it being over onerous, but that would persuade me finally.
Councillor Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's incredibly sensible that we set out some sort of constraints. If this, if we are minded to approve this application, I think via a section 106 agreement or something. I think that makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we have a proposal. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if it's helpful, obviously I've had discussions with the applicant and I did warn them that if we were successful, that there would be conditions imposed, therefore, and they would be acceptable to that. So if that helps to move this along, then I just wanted to offer that information that I had warned them that there would likely have to be the conditions imposed, that it would meet requirements. So hopefully that will help. I have approached that project subject with them.
So we have a recommendation to approve subject to the reasons stated and conditions stated. Does anybody else want to say before we move to a vote? Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Against.
Councillor Holiday.
Against.
Councillor Heinrich.
Against.
Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Rest. And Councillor Varley.
For.
So that's 7 for and 4 against.
Congratulations, the application is approved subject to the conditions be agreed. Right, we are at 11 o'clock. Do you members wish to take the Chroma application next, or would you prefer a break before we get into what could be another long one? Break? Okay, we'll take a 15-minute break at this point. First. Back at 1:15.
Just remind all members to mute their microphones, please, before they leave.
Okay, if members are ready, then let's return to the agenda. We move on to Chroma PF/20/2569, two-story side extension. Officer Barrow, could you present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, all. Yes, this application in Chroma is largely for three main parts. We have the demolition of an existing single-storey flat roof side garage, the erection of a two-storey replacement extension in that location with balcony to the front, a single-storey flat roof extension, and a detached outbuilding for ancillary use. The critical relationships to discuss throughout this application relate to design and amenity mostly. In principle, it is a town centre location and we would support residential development in such a location. In terms of highways as well, we do not see an increase in the number of bedrooms. So whilst we do lose a garage, we do not feel that the area to the front of the site is substandard in terms of parking provision. So to focus on the design and amenity, we are aware that it is quite a large scheme. There is a lot of development proposed, so it is certainly a balanced judgment. The roof line steps down from the main dwelling and does so in quite a clean manner, and it is a hipped roof slope, so we feel it does go far enough that the two-storey extension remains subservient to the host dwelling and also not a dominant addition on the character and appearance of the overall area. The single-storey outbuilding and single-storey rear extensions, whilst obviously additional development, are not considered excessive or overdevelopment of the site or area in this case. With regards to the amenity relationship, there's been a number of objections and comments regarding the provision of a balcony. The adjacent detached neighbour does also have a front-facing balcony. In relation to the application's balcony, there is a slide on the presentation which does indeed show the exact details of that. It is recessed from the side elevation to deliberately prevent overlooking to the property on that side and does not project further than the existing bay window structure. This, we are confident, ensures that the balcony only faces north and does not offer undue privacy harm to adjacent neighbours there, only viewing the North Sea and other public areas to the north of the property. In terms of the relationship between the two side walls, obviously we are proposing here a two-storey side extension. There are some existing side windows present in the detached neighbour. They do also have a very substantial south-facing window, so they do have alternative outlook, and this would not be affected in our opinion, considering that the extension does not project rearwards beyond the rear build line of that property. In addition, whilst we acknowledge that it is quite, there is increased proximity, the hipped roof and the dropped ridge line, we feel do go some way to creating an acceptable relationship in terms of just how close we are getting and the sense of over dominance. We don't view the two-storey side extension to unduly dominate the detached neighbour to the east, or create a sense of overshadowing, which is unacceptable in this case. So to summarise, I think it is a balanced view, and I'm pleased to put it before you, committee. But our recommendation is one of approval. We do find that the issues raised are on balance acceptable in this case. So thank you.
I have a representative of Chroma Town Council, Mr. Bill Harris, come to the front. You have 3 minutes. Timed.
I'll be very short. Cromer Town Council have objected to this application due to the lack of privacy and the design of the building that doesn't feel it's in context with the surrounding area. I think what you have to remember is there are 4 main entrances into Cromer, and the Runton Road is one of those 4 main entrances. The design takes a semi-detached building, and the symmetry of that building is lost by that by the extension, which is of concern. But it is obviously entering Cromer, you want to see good architecture. Obviously, I won't say much about the overmassing in the building because on either side of this premises, the residents are objecting to the overmassing. And just for your reference, you did refuse a similar style of development 5 properties down, which actually went to appeal, and the objection was upheld. So I would urge you from the Crown Council to reject this planning application.
Thank you. We have 1 objecting speaker, Mr. Douglas Hiscock. This, please.
Hello, my name's Douglas and I live at 53 Runton Road, and I'm also representing 57 Runton Road. Thank you for letting us speak today. Firstly, we have both submitted objections in writing, and I plan not to cover that ground here. I want to take this opportunity to draw the committee's attention to a number of additional points outside those specific matters. For context, this application has been redesigned 3 times and has been in progress for over 2 years. What is disappointing is that following all of this time and feedback, there has been minimal change. With this in mind, I'd like to draw the committee's attention to the following points in the application's journey. In the first application, the Town Council asked for a design and access statement, as there were concerns that the design was not compliant with EN4. At that point, the application was withdrawn. My question is, why has this request never been carried out? It does seem that this has been forgotten and should have been completed. The next submission also received an objection from the council due to the privacy and design not fulfilling the N4 requirement. Following this, the design was resubmitted, again with minimal change. Now, however, we are here and it's considered by the case auditor to be passable. I cannot see how this has been achieved. In fact, I have a number of observations to make regarding the case officer's report. The report states that the impact of the double-storey side extension will have minimal impact on the light into my kitchen. Firstly, I would like to challenge the definition of this just being a side extension. To me, the extension extends 2 meters beyond the current footprint of the back of the house and moves 3 meters closer to the boundary. This is far from a double side extension. In fact, it will significantly increase the shadowing, decrease the light entering the kitchen in the evening at the point is at its most use. This brings me to another comment regarding this report. Without doubt, it is a massive increase in the size of the building and will become a very cramped site, which is the exact reason the committee rejected the planning permission for 61 Runton Road. It is true that the house will remain with 3 bedrooms, but it will have an additional snug, an office, a considerable outbuilding, and 5 toilets. It is a massive development for the space it currently occupies and would loom and look very different from the properties in the neighbourhood. Lastly, I would like to point out the configuration of the new development. As well as these additional rooms, the living room will be on the 1st floor adjacent to the neighbour's bedroom. This would clearly affect the neighbour's privacy. Bearing in mind that the current bay windows allow each of the neighbours to see directly into these rooms, privacy is already an issue and would only be compounded by moving the living room from the first into the first floor. Finally, both of us have renovated our houses, which is incredibly important for the continuation of the community. However, we have striven to keep these in line with the history and culture of Cromer. It is this, if this application.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Stop you there.
Thank you.
We have no supporting speaker. So over to Councillor Adams then.
Thank you, Chairman. I have tried to be very clear and concise within the text of the calling, which I would refer you back to. The words I have used for my calling are very similar, in fact, to those used by the District Council to refuse a comparable application just a few doors away to the west at 61 Brunton Road, which has already been referred to today. This, in my view, is certainly a material consideration. In this case, it is the scale and massing of the property following development, which would result in the overdevelopment of the site. In my own view, there would be some impacts on amenity as described in our public objections, which I feel have been well made. And the building would be of a considerably larger scale following development when compared to the existing host building and the neighbouring properties in that area of Runton Road. It would certainly have an overbearing impact and dominate the host building. And in my view, it would result in a cramped form of development. So I've tried to be brief there. I believe we do have to be consistent where we can with previous decisions, and I believe you should look to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We also have received an email from Councillor Yassimi, who is unfortunately able to be present today. I believe you're going to read that out, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have the notes here from Councillor Yassimi, the Cromer Town Ward member. He says that, firstly, I've always maintained that each application should be looked at in its own individual scenario, and previous decisions shouldn't focus on another. Should focus on another. In other words, Councillor Yassimi says we deal with each one as a sole entity and not under the same umbrella. He says, I'd like to emphasise that Cromer Town Council have no objection to the application, however, have concerns about site overcrowding. I know the area well and would agree with the first part of this paragraph. Therefore, I would also have no objection overall. In summary, this application is considered to be acceptable in principle and planning material, including acceptable impact on character and appearance, amenity, and highway safety. I've always considered the human rights aspect of any application and the general interest of the public important. Therefore, would like to go with the officer's recommendation of approval.
Thank you. Members.
Sorry, the application we've got in front of us, the plan, has got the wrong application number on it. At the very bottom, it's got application 2544. We're actually looking at 2569.
Transposed the numbers.
They've yeah, so the two Cromers, the application number, the pictures are right, the reference at the bottom is wrong. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's just for a point of issue that someone would need to, we don't want it coming back to us to say.
Yes, I would. I've just noticed what the councillor there has said. I've had a look at it, and I would like to first of all apologise that error has taken place. I can confirm that the application is PF 202569, as per the title slide. I unfortunately did not change the footer, so I do apologise for that. But it is PF 202569.
Yeah, it's clearly in the agenda 2569. Yeah, I think a typing error can be forgiven. Thank you. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarity, we've heard the Cromer Town Council come and say they have objections, but in the report it says there are no objections. So it seems to me that there are objections here and that the report is wrong in that case. And then moving on to the actual application itself, I do share the concerns of the neighbours in terms of the massing of this building, and moving of things like a living room to the first floor could seriously impinge on neighbouring properties. So for that reason, I will be voting against this, the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some support for the local member, Councillor Adams, and what he has submitted today. The principle may well be correct, it may be policy compliant, but the application of the principle, I think, is going to result in over intensification of this particular site. I think in the back of my mind, I think there are limits on how much garden you can build on. And it seems to me that this extension is, pushing the envelope, as it were, in that respect. So I will be not supporting the recommendation. As regards the precedent of the application in relation to number 61, yes, Councillor Yassimi is right. We have to treat everything on its merits. However, when something goes to appeal, we all know that in practice we do refer to decisions in appeals, and they are relevant and a material consideration in considering any subsequent application such as this one. If it is approved, I would just ask that permitted development rights are withdrawn moving forward if the committee do approve it today, but I'm quite willing to propose or second that we don't accept the officer's recommendation on this occasion.
No, we will have to propose and second the recommendation and vote it down if that is the way the committee so feels. Just a couple of questions that raises, Joseph. In terms of garden space, is the remaining garden space adequate for a building of this size?
We believe so. I think the term pushing the envelope was mentioned in the chamber there, and I would agree that it does so. It is finely balanced, but I think that the garden that is remaining is appropriate for the dwelling and their own individual use of that land. If I could follow up as well, the permitted development rights, the report does state that we would look to remove those for alterations and extensions, as well as roof additions, to try and preserve any amenity relationship and give us additional control should approval be issued.
That's a toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm obviously not popular with officers today, but it's always a difficult thing because they actually do good, hard and solid work, and I know they put consideration into these reports. But on this one here, along with EN4 as suggested by Councillor Adams, the ward member, and I also think that SS7, important approach routes there, which was mentioned. So I think there's a couple of policies here that would make me question this. And just to look at the pictures with this line that goes off at an angle, I just don't think it's the scale and the massing with the bullet point 3, make efficient use of land while respecting the density, character, landscape and biodiversity. If we lose all that land, we've lost biodiversity. It's a huge extension on that small piece of land. So I would have to go with the sentiments of others and vote against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday.
Along the same lines, I'm interested in metrics. What's the percentage size of the extension compared with the footprint of the original house, and the design guide metrics as to distances between windows, because it strikes me that the distances between the neighbours' windows are very, very close, and I'm not sure it's in line with that. And also the artist studio has a bathroom, so that's an extra bedroom. So you're already into the expansion of the bedroom capacity here, and I would go with overdevelopment and overmassing with my colleagues.
Comment on those points, Joseph?
Yes, no problem. I do obviously accept that the studio and outbuilding into the rear does indeed detail a bathroom. We are confident that that building could indeed be conditioned and tied to the use of the dwelling. With regards to quantifiable numbers relating to the amenity relationship, I do not have those, unfortunately. It has been a subjective and balanced assessment of that amenity relationship. We think that the existing two-storey height wall there is going to create some form of overshadowing and dominance already, and it's a judgment as to whether the shorter hipped roof and reduced ridgeline significantly increases that. We've considered that in this case it's not an unacceptable additional impact over the existing relationship. But yes, of course, obviously members can make that judgment, and it is a balanced judgment.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
I've listened to what everybody has said, and I've got to come back on the final second from last paragraph on page 21. It is a massive extension and redesign of a property in a confined space, and right of privacy is something that must never be taken for granted. And with houses being extended, built upon, added to, sometimes even a second house put in the back garden of somewhere, I think the right of the neighbours that already exist there to their privacy is paramount, and that is a planning condition, loss of privacy. So I think on the last one, everything else is relevant. That is more relevant. So noting the area and the people, proximity of residents either side. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming that the art studio and the new extension are all in one lump, as it were. Can the officer tell me what percentage of all the extensions it is in the overall? Is it 30%, 40%? Can you give me some idea of the scale of it all, please?
Unfortunately, I haven't done the floor area calculations, so I cannot unfortunately give a quantifiable number. I think obviously it has been a consideration of how it looks and generally the scale of the proposal, but I wouldn't be able to give an exact number, unfortunately.
Chairman, if I can ask the case officer to put up the relevant layout slide for the plan, then members, even if we're unable to give a percentile, you can see what the actual relationships are with the extensions. Can you please do that?
So I hope you'll be able to see that there. That is the proposed floor plans, and then I should be able to scroll through to the existing for comparison.
It was the layout plan in particular.
The layouts, okay. There's a proposed site plan. So the white area where my mouse is the existing. As part of the existing, there is a single-storey small garage which is to be replaced. This element on the right here is 2-storey in height, and the two elements at the rear here are single-storey in height.
And again, Joe, at the back there, could you just pick up the studio building?
Yes, of course. The floor plans of the studio building. There you are.
Sorry, on the layout plan, Joe. That's
okay. Apologies.
Sorry.
Yes, just here running along the rear boundary here, single-storey and dual pitch roof design.
Thanks, Joe.
So would I be correct in calculating a guess that it's increasing the floor area by over 100% in total? Calculating estimate.
Chairman, please don't guess. We're making a finite decision. The plans are in front of you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? I get the feeling I can see where this is going, and but in order to, yes, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. The reason I asked that question because I believe some in the back of my memory there's a calculation you can only extend by so much. Are we sure how much this is? Percentage-wise overall?
The recording won't see me vigorously shaking my head, of course, Chairman. There is unfortunately no such hard and fast line as desirable as that would be for everybody. And for members, you've talked about EM4, you'll make your judgment on the basis of the plan. You've got a recommendation in front of you. We've got a long running case. It would be nice to have a decision today. Please, officers give their recommendation and it is a finely balanced one. So you will make your decision on the basis of the criteria under EN4 and what you've heard and seen today. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we have a recommendation for approval. Do I have a proposer and second from the floor? Maybe not. Follow the rules guidance and therefore deem there to be a proposer and seconder. Chair. We'll then go to a roll call vote.
I'll just confirm, Councillor Adams, you're excusing yourself from the vote? Okay. So Councillor Brown?
Quite sure what I'm voting for.
This is, so you're voting on the officer's recommendation for approval?
The recommendation is for approval. So one before us.
Therefore, I will vote against.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett?
Against.
Councillor Holliday?
Against.
Councillor Heinrich?
Abstain.
Councillor Kershaw?
Against.
Councillor Lloyd?
Against.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
Against.
Councillor Pearce?
Against.
Councillor Rest? Councillor Toy?
Against.
And Councillor Varley?
Against.
So that's 10 against and 1 abstention.
The application is thus refused. I would suggest that the applicant speaks further with planning officers.
Chairman, it isn't refused. We need an alternative
Oh, we need an
proposal.
alternative. Thank you for the
Please.
clarification.
There we go. So if you could ask for that.
Councillor Toy.
Okay, hopefully I can get this right, Mr. Chairman. So the alternative proposal that is not acceptable under SS7 in terms of important approach routes to the town, and as was laid out by the, I think it was the parish council, and also EN4, where I believe that the scale and massing and loss of biodiversity would be effective. So that they would be the 2 reasons I would put forward at this time.
So do we have a seconder?
Mr. Chairman, I would second also on the fact of the right of privacy of the neighbour.
Does anyone wish to speak on that?
Chairman, can we please have clarification on what particular interests of biodiversity are impacted by the proposals?
Yeah, just the loss of land, the fact that we have garden there at the moment, which can be used for planting, and we're going to lose a huge amount of land in terms of that biodiversity that's potentially there. But it's also the scale and the massing as well, that one paragraph, the sub-paragraph, if I can find it again, just bear with me a second, where it says, make sufficient use of land while respecting the density, character, landscape and biodiversity of the surrounding area. And I just think it's going to be into all of that, the scale and the density. So, and also suitably designed within the context of which they're set. So, and I don't think it's suitably designed. Does that help?
Thank you, Chairman. That's helpful. We just need some accuracy around those issues because we may have to defend this decision as appeal, of course. So the minutes will reflect that, I'm sure.
Thank you. Okay, we can therefore move to the vote.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
Proposal is to refuse, remember.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett?
For.
Councillor Holliday? Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Kershaw?
For.
Councillor Lloyd?
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
For.
Councillor Pearce?
For.
Councillor Rest? Councillor Toy?
For.
Councillor Varley?
For.
Okay, that's unanimous.
The application is therefore refused. Thank you. We move on then to Binham, BF 212926. I believe Darrell is speaking on this one. ahead, Darrell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. We're on item 10 on page 23 of the agenda. It's planning application reference PF 212926. The application is for a two-story side extension to a dwelling at 87 Warren Road, Binham. It's a two-story detached dwelling, understood to date from the mid-19th century. It sits gable end onto Warren Road, with the principal elevation facing west and the rear elevation facing east. It's located within the Binham Conservation Area. The proposed extension would be attached to the south side of the dwelling and extend further back than the rear elevation of the main part of the house. The main issue in the consideration of this application is the effect of the proposed extension on the character and appearance of the existing dwelling and also the conservation area. Officers consider the proposal would be harmful in this respect due to its size, form, appearance and proposed materials. It would not be subservient to the existing dwelling in terms of this and would be seen as an incongruous addition to it. Both the front and rear of the dwelling are visible in public views along Warren Road, as can be seen from the photos in the presentation, and as such there will be harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area and its significance, as I've mentioned already. There are no public benefits or material considerations that would outweigh this harm, as is required by paragraph 202 of the National Planning Policy Framework. It is also worth noting that the proposal before you now is identical to what was first submitted with planning application PF 192153. At that time, officers advised that the proposal would not be supported for the reasons I've run through in respect of this proposal. This led to a series of amendments to the proposals, resulting in approval of that application on the basis of the plans which are towards the end of the presentation. So the recommendation is for refusal of the applications for the reasons set out on page 27 of the agenda. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a number of speakers. Could I ask Councillor Penny Alford from Binham Council to the front, please? That's 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Development Committee for allowing me as a councillor representing Binham Parish Council to speak in support of this application. As a parish council, we've previously deliberated this application under its original application number and again with the current application. On both occasions, we gave full consideration of its design, scale and placement and its use of timber cladding and glass as a primary material and its impact on the host building. We unanimously agreed we would be able to support this design as a complement to the existing host brick and flint main building and didn't feel it did conflict with the preservation and enhancement of the conservation area. Whilst understanding that the brick and flint forms very much part of the character of the buildings within our conservation village, we are conscious that the timber style is used to good effect as a material within the wider area in incorporating development and design. The property sits on a generous plot and is at right angles to the road. It's at the farthest western end of Warren Road and not within the densely populated part of the village. Parish Council consider the proposed extension will provide much improved living accommodation and importantly, become a new permanent home for a local generational farming family. Like any new addition extension, especially to a property at right angles to the road, it will be visible, but we felt that it was in context and it sits on the plot overlooking open countryside to the roadside and to the rear and would not over dominate the visual aspect of the neighbouring property, which is a converted barn. We've witnessed other properties within the village substantially extend during the past 15 years, some of which also sit at right angles to the road on their plots, and some have extensions which in dimensional terms are much larger than this application and visible from the curbside. We ask therefore that you could kindly deliberate on this application in a favourable light in respect of its proposed design, what it's setting out to achieve, and can consider giving approval to this application. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Parish Council. Mr. and Mrs. Wales, the applicants, third generation of the family to have farmed in Binham, starting with Mr. Wales's grandfather. The Wales and the farm that are intrinsic part of the village with their dairy shop and soon to be completed tea rooms. When I first met them, it was obvious their love of the village, North Norfolk and Pebble Cottage. This property. I was given a complete history of the house from when Mr. Wales's grandfather's farm manager lived there and through to the farm foreman who was responsible for laying out the garden. Because of the history, the location and the love of the house, Mr. and Mrs. Wales felt that it would be an ideal location to retire to when they hand over the farm to their son. They had anticipated that this would be quite some time away, but the impending extension of the NDR, which slices through the land that their son currently farms, makes his current farm uneconomic and means that the handover will be much sooner. The cottage needed adaptation. The cat slide roof at the back is a particular problem, resulting in many headaches and a pain in the neck whilst I was surveying. The clients wanted the house to be suitable for them to live in long term and also to enable their children and grandchildren to come and stay comfortably and for the whole family to come together and eat together. The design had to maintain the character and integrity of the existing house that they loved and create links to the mature garden that surrounds the house to the east and the south. Ideally, it would also provide views to the wider agricultural landscape beyond. This is, as you're aware, the second time that these proposals have been submitted to for planning. The first application was granted consent after numerous iterations. The resultant scheme, bearing no relation to the original, and has a significant impact on the existing house and is, in my opinion, far more visible than the proposal before you. The approach taken originally and before you now was to provide an extension to the south of the house running perpendicular to the main house, but parallel to the neighbouring converted barn. By making the extension barn-like in appearance, the configuration creates a small farmstead. The link to the extension only lightly touches the existing house, not requiring any alteration to the existing flint walls, connecting to the brick coins beside the flint work and enabling the existing flint wall to be exposed within the extension. The aim is that the extension could be removed, leaving the original house. The materials contrast with the existing flint walls, simpler in design and detail, which makes the extension subservient to the main house. And the intricacies of the brick and flint work will be emphasised by the simplicity of the extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, the supporting speaker, I didn't know was going to come, has covered a lot of the points that I was going to make eloquently. What I would like to reiterate, Matt, I've given you some photos. I just wanted to be able to show some photographs of Warham Road, which you can flip through. You'll see from most of these photographs that over the last few years, large extensions have been granted on properties on Warham Road. If you can keep scrolling through. That's a good one. Well, it's a very steep road. In Norfolk, yeah. I've cycled there, it's horrible. That's me, yeah. Thank you. That's just that really for points of illustration. And I know we're taking every application in its merits, but these already exist and they're all seen from the road. The scale and mass of this extension isn't as large as that. There've been no objections. We've heard support from the Parish Council. It is acceptable under SS1, SS2. I think the main issue here, looking at the report, is the fact the officers believe that it plugs directly into the back of the cottage, and that gives a perception of mass. I believe that this is a family. I don't know them, I have met them, but they are third generation. They restored their barn in 1981 and won national awards for the restoration. They've built the raw milk shop, which is very popular. They've now got planning permission for a tea room, which will overlook the priory. We've heard about the timescale of why they want to move there. And actually this for them would then enable them to walk to work, which is a good thing, and to run the tea room. What I'd like to suggest, if this is possible, that we defer this application and ask the applicants and the officers to discuss a way of resolving this. I don't think it's far away from resolution. I think it's purely the plug-in at the rear is dictating the mass. I think it's a reasonable application. I would like to suggest that we could defer it for, if that's allowable, for discussion between officers to reach a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Brown.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in seconding, I would, I am aware, as the officer has quite rightly pointed out, that this property is in the conservation area, and therefore we have to apply additional criteria to anything which is built in the conservation area. It has to preserve or enhance. I'm not completely convinced that this application does so, but I think there is scope for further discussion to be had. So I'd be quite happy to second a deferral so that we can work to a mutually convenient solution with the applicants.
Right, we have a proposal for deferral. We're debating that at the moment. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the recommendation for refusal. It would be harmful to its form, character and appearance. I have to say I agree with that. And whilst they were lovely photographs provided by Councillor Kershaw, all of the extensions there were brick and flint. And I think the main objection here is the materials.
We are debating deferral rather than the application.
Yeah, I know. So I would rather that, I'm aware that the applicants are in the room. So I am hoping that they will go with the traditional form of building in the future.
Mr. Pearce.
My colleague has hinted or come across the part that concerns me the greatest, which is on page 25, where it starts of the report. And it says, against this context, it's difficult to see how the conservation design can possibly support this type of extension, being that it's largely glazing and of timber construction. I ask through you, Mr. Chairman, because you talked about the deferment as well, this could well come into it. Can I have some clarification from Officer Alson on this, or the case officer? Because, we've seen the photographs of other parts of the street where these extensions have been done. We're now looking at an extension that is largely glazing, which is a totally different type of construction. I'm not saying that I'm against it, but I have to take on this one, the area, conservation and everything else, and it comes down to what the design and the context of the building comes to. And I think that is more relevant than some of the other things. Thank you.
So to be clear, Councillor, you're asking the officers to define what is acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, unless we've got to go, if we're going to go to deferment, then this can come in. But I do want some clarification in this area because it's so important, I think, to this application.
Darryl, could you respond to that, please?
I would just say with the previous application, as the agents referred to, there were a series of reasons resulting in the scheme that was approved, but then they've simply come back with something that we've advised previously that was not acceptable. In my view, I think we need to make a decision on this application, and then if the applicant wants to enter into pre-application, wants to put a pre-application inquiry in, we can hopefully get to a point where we can support something outside of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, I respectfully would suggest through you that there has been extensive discussion, negotiation to arrive at this point. There is a request for deferral in front of the committee. It would be useful to understand what it is that the members want us to look at. It sounds as if we are being tasked to review whether or not we can come up with a design with the individuals concerned, with a design that can be truly said to preserve and enhance the conservation area. We have a design that is already approved. We've heard today that that won't meet the personal circumstances of the applicant. It is concerning for me, Chairman, that if we are deferring this item, and that will be a matter for members to discuss in the light of the officer's advice, that we are very clear that actually I understand entirely that personal circumstances will drive designs and requirements for extensions. But in truth, Chairman, the personal circumstances of the individuals, respectfully how long they may have been in the village and if they run a local business, sadly carry very limited, if any, material weight, because we cannot condition that this building shall remain in the ownership of these individuals or indeed their family in perpetuity. That would be inappropriate and unlawful. What we must do is turn our eyes to policy EN4 and the need to preserve and enhance our conservation area. If members are looking at deferral, it will be useful to understand, are we looking at materials? Are we looking at the scale, heights and relationships of the proposals? I had a conversation with a long-standing applicant in a ward that we will speak about very shortly, and I had to be very clear that regretfully officers cannot be the designers of schemes. We will help, we will look at the areas of concern, the report is clear on those, and we will look at the areas that members want us to address if they wish to defer the application. But you've heard today from the case officer, we believe that we've actually exhausted that process respectfully, and we are standing in front of you today with a recommendation. So that's our position as officers, with greatest respect to members and the applicant, and you will make your decision today to either debate that deferral proposal further or to make a decision on the application under the recommendation as it stands. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. We are debating the deferral at the moment. Come back there, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to come back. Can I just ask a specific point in terms of, because I think we are challenging materials here. Can I just ask the officer if timber cladding within a conservation area is a material that's acceptable? I thought it might be an exception under some general permitted development order previously introduced, but I might be wrong on that. So I'd just ask the officer if he could correct me or advise me on it, please.
Extensions carried out under permitted development rights, and the materials have to match the existing materials used on the dwelling. We're not looking at a permitted development scheme here, but that's the general rule.
Could I ask, with the applications already been previously approved, whether timber cladding was involved with that? I seem to recall from the photographs it was.
I just checked the presentation, Chair.
It was, Chair, on PF. It was approved as timber cladding on the previous application.
Councillor Kershaw stated it was.
Sorry, Chair, it's not annotated on the plans that are in the presentation, so I can't confirm either way. Thanks.
Councillor Kershaw. Okay, just a useful point to keep in mind. Councillor Holliday.
I just wanted to make sure if we were deferring it, what we were deferring it for, because I heard Councillor Kershaw say it was about the fact that the extension is plugging into the south facing gable. Well, I hear from other people there are lots of other concerns. And so if we are deferring it, we have to be absolutely clear. But it sounds like we want to redesign it completely. So is it deferral or is that the appropriate route to go?
I think as Officer Rosen said, the proposer secondly to give me guidance as to what they're deferring it for and what they would expect to see at the end of that further discussion.
And I think the deferral is to, I don't think we're that far away from an acceptance. I think the plug-in issue is one of the major problems that comes out from the report. The timber was on the previous application, so I don't see that the material construction is that. Maybe the glazing could be taken into account, but for me, it's the main point of the refusal was the fact that it plugged in and caused a mass. And I think if that extension could be set back, it would offset the problem and improve the design. But I'd like to see a discussion between the officers and applicants on that basis.
Councillor. Councillor Tory.
Yeah, when I read through the application and the paperwork, it struck me that whilst I appreciate that officers have done considerable work, they did it before with the previous application that's been approved. And I also, and maybe it's an option that we refuse it and they come back for pre-application advice. But I think there's a solution. That's the thing. I don't think that we're going, no, this is horrible. I think there's a solution. And from the design and conservation officer, where it almost suggests that, like as Councillor Kershaw said, if it was stepped back slightly, if things were done, it just feels that there's a solution there in what's been written by officers. So I need guidance, I guess, whether deferment is the best way or to refuse and allow pre-application advice. But I still feel there's a solution there, having read it. So I'm sitting unknown at the moment, but feel that there is a solution that we can find.
If I'm understanding this correctly, there has been very considerable discussion already. And I'm not sure going back to basically back to the drawing board would get us any further. And that this is potentially design that works for the applicant, but there are details which we disagree with and which do need further resolution before we could approve it or otherwise. And that deferral to enable a short amount of time might be useful. I note that the architect has raised his hand. I wouldn't normally allow him to speak, but I will very briefly on this occasion. Right, thank you. That does clarify us to some extent. Okay, we have a motion for deferral on the basis of further discussion relating to the materials and the actual positioning of the extension in relation to the main building. I'm understanding it correctly. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
We have a seconder. So we will vote on deferral, please.
Okay, Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fitz-Tillett.
For.
Councillor Holliday.
Against.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle,
4.
Councillor Pearce,
Got to go for.
Councillor Rest, Councillor Toy,
4.
Councillor Varley.
4.
That's 11 for and 1 against.
Okay, the application is therefore deferred to enable further discussions between the architect, the applicant and the planners.
I think Officer Watson wanted to speak. Chair.
Oh, Darren.
I just wanted to clarify with committee if officers get to a point whereby the scheme could be recommended approval, would members want it to be brought back to committee or not? Thank you.
Would members be happy for an officer's decision if it was for approval?
With the request for delegated powers, if it was agreed, I would have thought it was acceptable.
Chairman, it would be for officers to update the ward member and to return to committee with your agreement as chairman of the committee if required. If we're not going to make a decision without committee reference, then that would need requirement of ward member and the chairman's engagement on those matters.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on then.
Sorry, apologies, Mr. Chairman. I know we're trying to get through today. I just wondered whether it would be right or appropriate, again, advice from officers, if we put some time scale into that, so that, you know, officers need to move these applications. There's already been a large amount of time put into this. Whether that would be reasonable to put a time scale on it, but that those discussions could take place. Because really, in effect, once the appointment's set, hopefully there would be just, you know, a few hours work. One would hope that there should be some discussion. So we don't want something that's going to hang on for weeks. I don't know if that would be helpful to officers and if that's right or appropriate.
Chairman, I would suggest a formal request for an extension of time for no more than 3 months and return to committee with any requirement for determination within that 3-month period. If we're beyond that 3 months, then obviously we would then have to seek further discretion. The aim of this committee, I understand, is for light touch change to the scheme, not root and branch reform. Okay.
I agree. Yes.
Are we all content with that? Thank you. I think you now have a position to work to. Right, next item, Gunthorpe, PF 212656, attached. Ooh. Oh. Who's doing this one? Alice.
I think it's Colin.
Or Chair. Oh, you're doing this, Colin. Alice, Dan.
Alice,
go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is item 11 on the agenda, which is application reference PF 212656, presented on behalf of Officer Alice Walker. The application proposes a single-storey detached domestic outbuilding, which is a retrospective application used as an art studio at Old Schoolhouse, Bell Road, Gunthorpe. The officer report is on pages 29 to 34 of the report pack. The site comprises of the garden of the Old Schoolhouse, which is Grade 2 listed. The outbuilding itself consists of a modern design with weathered larch cladding stained dark brown, adjacent to which is another small standard garden shed. The main issue for consideration under this application is the design of the outbuilding and its visual impact upon the setting of the Grade 2 listed asset. It is recognised that the applicant has shifted the outbuilding from an originally proposed position to the position now before us, which has to an extent lessened the visual impact. Indeed, it has been concluded that the harm arising from the proposal is considered to be at the lower scale of less than substantial. Notwithstanding this, officers are required to afford great weight to the conservation of heritage assets, irrespective of the level of harm, as required under paragraph 199 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Any harm must be outweighed by public benefits, as again required under paragraph 202 of the NPPF. In this instance, It is recognised that there are modest economic and community benefits arising from the proposal. Ultimately, officers are keen to stress that this is a very finely balanced recommendation, and with the conclusion that in this instance the benefits do not quite do enough to outweigh the identified harm, and thus the proposal is contrary to policy EN8 and paragraph 202 of the NPPF. To conclude, the officer recommendation is one of refusal for the reasons as stated on pages 33 and 34 of the report. Members are quickly advised that the reasoning for refusal should refer to paragraph 202 of the NPPF and not paragraph 199 as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I understand we had a message or an email from the clerk to the parish council. Somebody was going to read out. You've got it right. Thank you. Okay.
With your permission, Chair, the clerk of the parish council, Lucy Bent, is unable to attend due to work commitments, as is the clerk of the parish council, and has sent in the following letter, which I'll read out. I write on behalf of Gunthorpe and Bale Parish Council in unanimous support for the above application. It is the view of all councillors that the artist studio and storage shed do not detract from the aesthetic of the listed building for the following reasons. 1, the design, materials and appearance of the outbuildings is simple and sympathetic to the old school house, traditional flint and slate. 2, the position of the outbuildings next to the southwest boundary is appropriate and discreet, and already screened by existing large shrubs. Additional planting would be very effective to further screen the studio and shed. 3, there is minimal impact on the view and enjoyment of the listed building from the majority of directions, the only exception being the approach from Hall Lane. However, the restriction is partial and brief, and in that it reduces as you travel towards the building along Hall Lane towards the junction with Bale Road. Having consulted with residents in Gunthorpe, the overwhelming majority are in favour of the application. Indeed, only one resident has expressed any objection, as evidenced by a petition in support of the application signed by 43 residents. Lastly, the addition of 2 permanent residents to Gunthorpe who have invested in the long-term restoration of the old school house and also work in the village and contribute to local community events is widely considered to be of significant benefit to our parish. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no objecting speakers. I have 1 supporting speaker, Debbie Boone. Should be okay with the 3 minutes by now. Said it enough times this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of my application. I'm Debbie Boone. My husband and I purchased the old schoolhouse in December 2020 and have renovated it and made it our permanent home. I'm a successful wildlife and coastal artist represented by one of the country's major art dealers, exhibiting internationally and also locally here in Norfolk. In economic terms, these original paintings achieve values from £4,000 upwards, with limited edition prints available at more accessible prices. I paint on a large scale. My canvases can be up to 2 metres. Therefore, the need for a dedicated studio space is a fundamental part of my working environment. After an unsuccessful planning application last year for the studio, we considered reducing the size and relocating it. Unfortunately, at this time, we were given some inaccurate advice from our architect that the studio we have built did not need permission. Consequently, we find ourselves applying retrospectively. The artist studio is the minimum size necessary for me to be able to produce my work. It is located close to the southwest boundary to benefit from existing screening in this corner of the site and to minimise the impact on views of the listed building. The weathered larch blends with the rural surroundings and the schoolhouse building materials of slate and grey flint. We chose the simple, clean lines and sympathetic weather materials to complement the existing house. This simplistic design was to ensure the new outbuilding did not compete with the detail and historic character of the property. The schoolhouse is primarily listed for the interest of the building itself. The studio does not impact the listed building, but it does result in some partial restriction in the ability to appreciate the significance of the building when viewing from the northerly aspect. We feel strongly that the very small percentage of views that the studio affects does not impact on the overall aesthetic of the house. The Conservation Officer acknowledges the impact to be at the lower end of less than substantial harm. This low impact must be balanced against the contribution to the vitality of the countryside from the house being in active use and the associated modern home working needs, the cumulative contribution of art to the cultural benefit of the area, and its associated economic impacts on the North Norfolk.
Thank you for that. Local member then, Richard again.
Sorry, it's me again. I know there are retrospectives. We hate retrospectives. Having spoken to the applicant, I believe that the advice given was incorrect. Hence, the building was constructed and has now come back for application. The reason I've referred this to the committee is having seen the site, I think there is very little harm caused, and I think it's been recognised by officers that the level of harm is far reduced where the building is now situated. I think the applicant has made every attempt to try and comply with conservation and has agreed there is to remove, if required, the additional shed that is in the garden, which is certainly not as beautiful as the one that's been built, and put in planting if required to soften the aspect. It is a very finely balanced application. It's permissible under SS1 and SS2 and EN4 and EN8. We've agreed, we've heard that this has brought the restoration of the schoolhouse itself is to a high standard. And my concern is we now have people working and living in the village, and if they can't carry on their profession there, they could then move, and this could become another holiday home, which I think would be a serious disadvantage to the village. I understand from the parish council that this couple are involved in community activities and are involved in the open studios, which North Norfolk District Council have been supporting this year as it split from the Norwich Council, and brings in over £500,000 of income to North Norfolk as tourist industry over the year. So there is some financial benefits. And being so finely balanced, I'm afraid I'm going to have to vote against the officer's recommendation again, and I will be wanting to vote for approval under SS2, SS1 and EN4 and EN8 and under NPPF section 14. Thank you.
We'll return to that should the recommendation as in front of us actually fall. Could I just ask, Colin, if this was not a listed building, would this be an acceptable structure?
What I would say on that point is that that's very difficult to answer. I think officers, as part of the application in front of us, we have to weigh up the listed nature of the building. NPPF requires us to apply great weight to conserving heritage assets, and that any harm, any level of harm, has to be outweighed by public benefits. Now, I think because it's so finely balanced, Councillor Kershaw obviously understands both sides of the argument. It just so happens that there is disagreement on that from the officer's point of view. The view is that the benefits do not quite outweigh the harm identified.
Officer Rice.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to Colin's comments, I think it's really important that you are weighting accurately and appropriately all of these issues. So you're looking at the issues of harm raised. This is a listed building. The listed building has a setting. If we're looking at additional landscape planting, that may help to screen these additions, these outbuildings, but it may have a derelictus relationship to the setting of the listed building in the wider landscape. This is a very prominent building. Councillor Kershaw is very well aware of the nature of the site, and you've seen the presentation. So that's one element to look at in terms of the mitigation. The other element to the mitigation, I'm going to say the same thing that I said a few moments ago. I don't decry in any way the importance of the individual's contribution to the local community, or indeed the benefit that art can bring to our local communities. We're very much encouraging of those issues through our corporate plan objectives. The issue here, Chairman, is this is a permanent building. This is a building that will be there, not just for this applicant, but in the future. So any benefit that you're ascribing to those other issues that arise need to be appropriately weighted. They're weighted to a personal individual who we hope will be there and a member of this community for many years. Alternatively, Chairman, we can't impose a planning condition that says the building shall only be used for this person or shall be used for a very limited amount of time. We're asked to judge the appearance of this building and its setting in relationship to that listed building and weight appropriately with any positive elements that you believe are given wider public benefit in terms of the weighting. So that's the way in which this debate should proceed, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryerson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members of the law, Section 66 of the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act says, in considering whether to grant planning permission for development which affects a listed building or its setting, the local planning authority shall have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting. And so the law requires you to have special regard. It tilts the initial balance, and so material considerations going the other way have to have additional weight. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Come back to my original question. Officer Ryerson said this is a permanent building. It's not deep foundations and so on. I wouldn't personally regard it as permanent, but then I'm not a planning officer. I don't have these accurate definitions. Under other circumstances and not a listed building, would that be permitted development? See where the original advice may have come from. Colin?
My understanding is that even if it wasn't a listed building, it still wouldn't be permitted development because it is beyond the principal elevation of the building. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Personally, I've seen bigger buildings than this in people's gardens, certainly around some of the larger gardens in Fakenham, which seem to be now applying everything they can to fit in there. With all due respect to the people that own it, to me it looks like a very posh garden shed. And you're right, I can't see any footings, I can't see anything wrong with it. Personally, I don't see why this should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you. As has been said several times, this is finely balanced, and I have to say, when I first saw this on the agenda and looked through the papers, I was surprised it was refused. To be honest, it seems to me that we should be supporting. There's economic benefits to approving this as a workplace. It doesn't look substantial. The comments made about it's nothing more than a shed. If you drove past this, you think it was a garden shed in actual fact, and I don't see any harm in this whatsoever. So I can't go with the officers on this occasion, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for me, on this occasion, to decide if this is doing harm or not, the best people to answer that are the people that live there and know the area. We've had a representation from the parish council, and we've heard how locals were consulted and there was unanimous support, and therefore, not having a site visit, it's difficult for me to say how it fits with the trees and things. We can do Google Maps and things and look around. So on this occasion, I would have to go with what's being said here. It is finely balanced. We do understand the asset. I've considered where it is in relationship to the church as well, but it's actually behind the building in relationship to the church. So I think if locals say it's not doing harm, then we need to accept that answer. And we've heard the arguments for economic benefit, which I accept what Officer Ryerson says. Going forward, but none of us have crystal balls. I think we have to deal with what we have here now. And so, yeah, I think I would have to go against the officer's recommendation on balance. Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all know my resistance to retrospective applications, so let's move forward. Can I have just a little bit of clarification from Officer Ralston on what is it an actual opinion that decides something that is this closely balanced to cause harm or not cause harm? I mean, if it was a 10-story building, it would be easy, but we've got a situation here of, as Councillor S said, it looks just like a garden shed. It's not a garden shed, but and I don't mean to be detrimental to the building, but it doesn't cause an actual lot of harm because of the fine balance, which the officer has, the case officer has said. We've got unanimous support from the local community, and they obviously feel that it doesn't cause harm to their view, to their living, to their life, to their everyday existence. But at the same time, it does bring an economic value to the applicant. And obviously with the fact that she's involved with open studios and everything else, which is an international event, that is something to be on the plus side. But I just asked for clarification for this one and possibly for future cases. What actually, is it still a planning opinion, officer opinion, or what actually decides which is harm and which is greater harm and which is not?
Through you, Chairman, what we use are conservation officers. You've got a detailed report from the conservation officer, and I would ask members to turn their attention to the last 2 paragraphs of the conservation officer's comment. They have been repeated to you today, and it does turn on the issue of paragraph 202 of the MPPF. That obviously is an error in the statement that's been made. I think positions may have been updated with new versions of the MPPF since. So we do have harm. The issue, as I directed you to, is the matter of weighting. The harm is to the lesser end of the scale. We're not dealing with an issue where you've got a spectrum of harm and you've got a modest building in the grounds of a listed building that are causing substantive levels of harm. So be very clear on that. This is a moderate level of harm. It's towards the very lower end of the spectrum of harm. So what you're then tasked to do in your decision making is looking at the balance of what wider public benefits may accrue or mitigation may be delivered to help with the impact of the harm that's creating. It's impossible to say, Chairman, today that there's no harm. Clearly there is. The building is there. It is not part of the original setting of that listed building. So I believe members, you need to review that, and it's impossible to say that no harm is created to the listed building. The officer's advice is that it is a very moderate lower end of the spectrum level of harm. We then turn to what can be added. The conservation officer gives some advice in that final paragraph of their statement. I've given you advice to the limited issues that relate to potential economic benefits. You may see those differently, members, but you are granting a permanent permission today for this building. This is a permission that is not time limited. It is a permanent permission. Whatever the construction, you're giving a permanent consent for this building. So those are the matters to consider, Chairman. I'm happy to advise further if you feel necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Kirsham.
Sorry to come back. I just need to, I mean, for me, it's important that if you look at the photographs we have, that the applicant is prepared to take down the existing shed, which to me is much more of an eyesore than the new shed. So that to me lessens the harm. I understand that this is regarded as a permanent structure, but it's already been moved, so it's not that permanent. I'd leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. We've got 2 more people, and at that point we will need to move to a vote. Otherwise, we're going to be here till middle of the afternoon. How's the holiday?
I just think we have to be very careful and mindful of the fact that North Norfolk depends on heritage assets, and if we start treating them too lightly, you know, we're going to lose a lot of economic benefit from tourism. And so I would say that even though it's minimal harm, it is harm to a listed asset and heritage asset. We should take that seriously.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Taking my mask off. I think we've established there's less than substantial harm, and that the structure is well situated within the site. I also believe, and perhaps it hasn't been said enough, that it increases the sustainability of the host building. There are clearly some public benefits, and I appreciate also economic benefits. I would like us to move to the vote, Chair, on the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I intend to do. The recommendation is one of refusal for the reasons set out in the paper. Do I have a proposer and a seconder for that, or my position again? You will propose. Thank you.
I'll propose, yeah.
Thank you. And I will second from the chair in that case. So the recommendation is for refusal, and that is what you are currently voting on.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
On the officer's recommendation, Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Against.
Councillor Holiday.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Kershaw.
Against.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Toy.
Against.
Councillor Varley.
Against.
So that's 9 against and 3 in for.
Right, we go back to the procedure before. This is something of a deja vu every time. Councillor Kershaw, do you wish to?
Thank you, Chair.
Proposal,
Yes, I would like to propose that we accept this application. I think it's permissible under SS1, SS2, EM4 and EN8, and I believe that the amount of harm is minimal, and this is a finely balanced, very finely balanced situation, and I appreciate the work that the officers put in here, but I think the benefits actually outweigh the deficiencies, and that's for those reasons I will vote to approve the application. Thank you.
do you have a seconder? Councillor Toy.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Adams summed up where I was landing on this. Actually, the MPPF 202, which I'll read so people can hear it, whether a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, the harm should be weighed against the public benefit of the proposal, including where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. And I think the fact that this property it's enabling this property to be maintained and not become, a holiday home or something else, for me, changes the balance on 202. So it's the judgment on whether NPPF 202 for me, in support of the other things that have been said as well. So I think the balance for me falls the other way, and that's why I would be happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've had all the arguments on something new. I'll ask Philip to comment.
Just to look towards proposed conditions, Chairman, just to help guide that discussion and that debate, it would be useful again to have the area that members consider that the appropriate conditions should cover. We've heard that there is a potential positive benefit to the removal of the more utilitarian storage shed on the site. You could require that to be removed under planning conditions attached to the grant of this consent, or that could be subject to a separate legal agreement. I believe conditions would suffice in this issue. You've also heard, Chairman, as a group of members, that there is an issue regarding potential landscape improvements. You heard from me that the importance of this setting, its appearance in the landscape, is also important too. We could certainly look at a landscaping condition that may help to assimilate the impact of this development. However, I think we do acknowledge as members, significant efforts have been made by the applicant to already mitigate those harms and that landscaping issue. But you will use your judgment as to whether or not conditions are required. We spoke at some length, Chairman, about a permanent permission or otherwise. This is an application for a permanent permission. You may consider whether or not it should be granted on a temporary basis for a longer term, say up to 15, 20 years. You may give that some weight. That may be part of your mitigation. Finally, Chairman, obviously there is some discussion about the good contributions that this individual makes to the local community and the local economy. I would normally advise very strongly against the grant of permanent permissions, permanent personal permissions, because we inevitably see later applications to vary conditions. However, members, that is within your gift also. So that's my discussion on the matter of conditions. It is a retrospective application for the reasons you've been given. So we don't need to look at staining, colours, etc. You have what you've got and you can move forward on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Kershaw, do you wish to?
I think that's very sensible. I think the applicant has already said that they are prepared to remove the existing shed, and if a subsequent planting is requested, they would be happy to apply. So I think those two conditions would be appropriate.
Okay. There's no further discussion. We go to the vote to approve, subject to the conditions.
Councillor Adams. Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
For.
Councillor Holliday.
Against.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Kershaw. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Mancini Boyle. Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Toy.
For.
Councillor Varley.
For.
So that's 10 in favour and 2 against.
Thank you. The application is therefore approved, subject to conditions, detailed of which will be with the planning officers. It's been a very wide-ranging discussion on this one, which might normally have been over in 5 minutes. So thank you, members. Let us move on. So we might even need another coffee break. We've been here another hour and a half. We'll get Stibbard out of the way then, make a decision at that point. So Stibbard PF 211630, the 3 timber buildings in the certified campsite. Who have we got on that one? I'll find my notes.
John Pavey Smith, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the erection of 3 timber buildings to provide WC, a shower and washing facilities at a certified campsite. The application is retrospective. As you can see from the slides, the site is where the red line is. It's to the north of Falsham, just next to Falsham Road. The application site, you can see the red line, which is the certified camping site, the extent of it. The next slide is the site plan for where the sheds are. I'd just like to note that to members that this is not a change of use. This is only for the retrospective permission of the 3 sheds. This is a picture of the 3 sheds looking east. It should be noted that the hedgerow behind is actually higher than the sheds. They sit at 2.4 metres high, and so screen them from the road. This is a picture looking north. You can see the 4 tents, which comprise of the camping site there. And this is just looking south to see that where the sheds are, they are screened by the existing hedgerow. We have the certificate for the exemption for the camping site by the applicant. The main issues dealing with this application is the principle. In the report under EC3, there is provision for the extension of businesses in the open countryside if the scale is small. Officers are of the opinion that this is the case here. The impact on the design of the landscape of the open countryside. In this instance, we think the 3 sheds, the impact is small due to them being well screened by the existing hedgerow. The effect on the living conditions of the occupiers of neighbouring dwellings, the distance is significant, and due to the fact that the sheds will only be facilities of the existing tourist use there, the impact on dwellings will be low. And finally, the effect on the highway. It is officer's opinion that the 3 sheds in themselves are not traffic generating, and so the impact on the existing access to the certified campsite, there will not be any impact on that particular junction in terms of intensification of it through the 3 sheds. So in conclusion, the application is recommended for approval with conditions relating to the only people who can use the 3 sheds are tourists using the existing camping site, and within 3 months of the business ceasing use, the sheds shall be removed in their entirety from the site. That is my presentation, and thanks for your time, members. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no town or parish speaker, no objecting speaker. We have the applicant, Mr. Alex Waters.
As the applicant, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and give the committee a clearer picture of our small business venture. Following the collapse of my events company in 2020 due to the pandemic, we decided to turn our small field into a glamping site. The aim from the outset was a small, low-impact site to provide visitors with an opportunity to enjoy the Norfolk countryside, 20 minutes inland, but with access to the coast if desired. After research and advice from the district council, we applied for an exemption certificate to run the field as an exempted campsite. The field was in poor condition after years of neglect, with 6-foot weeds, old bonfire sites, and overgrown hedges. We started by employing a local farmer to plough in, level and reseed the field back to an area of grassland. We then planted 10 new trees and fenced into the boundary into the Hendel Western Woods. We feel that we have introduced the minimum amount of infrastructure possible to allow the site to function effectively for our guests. The application is regarding the 3 wooden sheds, which house 2 showers, 2 WCs and a washing up area. These are connected to a small septic tank situated on the opposite side of the field from any watercourses. The pond mentioned in one of the objections is owned by us and is over 70 metres away from the tank and soakaway. Clearly, we would have no desire to pollute our own pond or ditches, and there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever of this having occurred since the system was installed. The facilities all functioned perfectly during last season and were in fact complimented by many of our guests, both in person during their stay and in multiple reviews. There is no mains electricity on the field, and all lighting is provided by solar and battery powered lights for minimum light pollution. In addition, the access issues raised by the parish council and the objectors are being dealt with by way of an entirely separate planning application. The site was frequented almost entirely by couples and young families. There was absolutely no loud music or activities throughout the 3-month season that could be described as a disturbance. Tourism brings in a substantial amount of money into Norfolk, and all our guests contributed to the local economy last summer with visits to events, shops, pubs and restaurants. Tourism also created over 40,000 jobs. We hope that we have contributed to this in a small way by employing someone part-time to help us run the site, as well as the local farmers who have helped us to transform the field. In a recent article in the EDP, Councillor Kershaw said he had been working closely with Visit North Norfolk to widen the tourism offering, with plans to bring tourism inland. Presumably this is to alleviate some of the pressure on the popular coastal areas. We hope our small venture fits into this vision for the future of tourism in North Norfolk, and we are allowed to keep operating these facilities on our land. To summarise, it would be difficult to run a functioning campsite with any less infrastructure installed. Thank you.
Local member then, councillor Kershaw. No? It's not you. Oh, I thought it was part of you. Oh, not here. Okay. I'm corrected on that then. In which case, Tim.
Thank you. I'm persuaded by the arguments in favour of the application. I feel it should be approved in line with officer recommendations, and that would be my proposal. Thank you.
Okay, so you are proposing. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to second the proposal from the officer. I am struggling to understand why this has actually come to the committee, to be perfectly honest. I think this is a decision that could have been delegated, and it's disappointing that we haven't had any representations from the local ward member to us today, nor an appearance. I think that's a bit disappointing. But I think, and also it just proves that every day is a school day, because I thought that I knew about every camping scheme under the sun, having been challenged in my own ward, and lo and behold, we have section 269 of the Public Health Act 1936, pre-Second World War, exemption certificate legislation crawling out of the woodwork to justify an application or support an application. I wish the applicant every success in his business. Well done to him, and I can support the recommendation.
Yes, so there are dozens of certificate locations by those approved organisations who can grant them across the district. Usually very popular.
Within my ward, Ittringham, they had a similar thing in a field there just outside the village. The question of access is not an issue. It worked well, and I would support it as well, the recommendation.
Nigel?
Yeah, I was going to second it myself, Chair, but I would like it on record that when a member takes it upon himself to bring an application to committee and then doesn't turn up, that's just not acceptable in my view. And I'd just like that to be on the record. Thank you.
No, twice today.
Thank you, Chair. Having been quoted by the applicant, and it's true. I mean, no, this is exactly the sort of scheme we need to see going forward. This is exactly what we've been trying to encourage through COVID with grant schemes, and it's great to see someone who's had the foresight and innovation to come forward with this sort of scheme. It's away from the coast, it's inland, it's developing sustainable tourism, and I really can't see why it's come before committee.
Okay, move to the vote.
Okay, on the officer's recommendations then, so councillor Adams, councillor Brown,
For.
councillor Fitch-Tillett,
For.
councillor Holiday,
Again.
councillor Heinrich,
For.
councillor Kershaw,
For.
councillor Lloyd,
For.
councillor Mancini Boyle,
For.
councillor Pearce,
For.
councillor Rest, councillor Toy,
For.
councillor Varley.
For.
Okay, so that's 11 in favour and 1 against.
The application is approved. Would members like another break for 10 minutes, or shall we carry on? I think we're getting towards the end of this marathon now. Okay, we return to Cromer. PF 212544, replacement windows. Who's got that one? Colin.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is item 13 on the agenda, which is application reference PF 212544, presented on behalf of Alice Walker. The application proposes replacement windows to the first floor apartment at Flat 1 Hagley House, Cromer. Officer report is found on pages 41 to 44 of the report pack. At present, the first floor windows are of white painted timber sash design, the proposal being to replace these with heritage wood grain effect UPVC frames of matching style. The existing windows are of poor condition and in need of replacement. It should be noted that the new windows would match new windows already installed on the second floor as approved under application reference PF 210968 under delegated authority. Hagley House is a locally listed building in a prominent position on Church Street and within the Cromer Conservation Area. It is acutely recognised by officers that a replacement of timber windows with UPVC is broadly undesirable. However, in reality, this is extremely difficult to resist, where such windows have been incorporated locally, particularly in the immediate vicinity of the site, and even more so in this particular case, given their previous approval at second floor on the same building. It is also recognised that there are also some benefits in unifying the style of window on the frontage in matching the windows above. For these reasons, it's not considered that the proposal would result in an unacceptable level of harm to either the host building nor the wider conservation area, and as such complies with policies EN4 and EN8. So to conclude, the officer recommendation is one of conditional approval as stated on page 43 of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, nice and clear. We have one town representative, Councillor Tim Bartlett. 3 minutes as always.
Thank you. The red light indicates this is working already.
It does.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and everybody else for giving me an opportunity to speak. Forgive me, Councillor over there, for not knowing your name, but your remark that North Norfolk depends on its heritage assets, the remark you made a little earlier, gives me an introduction into my assertion on behalf of Cromer Town Council that we do not welcome the use of plastic, particularly in our valuable conservation area. The sound reasons for this stance, for example, the economic argument, Cromer, in our view, and probably yours too, earns its living mainly from visitors, and research shows the quality of our Edwardian and Victorian built environment plays a major role in attracting visitors to spend their money in Cromer, rather than other seaside towns not so architecturally blessed. For this reason, we will continue, we have in the past and we will in the future, to resist shoddy, ugly and unsympathetic repairs and alterations. The degradation of our conservation area under your watch, I have to say, is depressing, as a walk around the town will show, revealing the deterioration of our heritage buildings caused by the remorseless drip feed of unsympathetic alterations, questionable planning decisions and energetic plastic window salesmen. If no stand is made, there is only so much time left before there is nothing left worth protecting. But there is also the wider and more serious issue of the threat posed to our environment by the continuing use of plastic, particularly when there are more acceptable and environmentally friendly options, and Cromer Town Council will continue to oppose the installation of plastic doors, windows and cladding products. Even outside the conservation area, plastic must be phased out as soon as possible. The problems caused by its manufacture, installation, disposal are all too environmentally damaging for its use continue, as I'm sure you're all here well aware. For these reasons, together with the backing of EN8 and EN4, and in line with 5.6.1 and 6.3 of the design guide, Cromer Town Council objects to the use of UPVC within the conservation area, where Hagley House occupies a prominent position in Church Street, opposite the Grade 1 listed parish church. Hagley House is specifically mentioned in the much maligned conservation area appraisal, as is Bond Street, where windows are considered a signature feature. In this sensitive position, the wholesale removal of the original timber windows and their replacement with PVC equivalents is clearly not something we can support. Rejection would also be good news for the local joinery businesses who can supply high-performance wooden replacement windows. But to press home to the point, To anyone who keeps themselves reasonably well informed, the wider issue is by far the more important. At some point, we must just say no.
Stop you there.
I beg your, I had loads more to say. It's all really interesting.
Yes, I know, but you're allowed 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for your
Interesting
attention.
it might be. Okay, I have no objecting speaker and no supporting speaker. Councillor Adams, and we have a written statement from Councillor Yassine to follow.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, I just wanted to start by thanking Councillor Bartlett. He's been very patient with us today, staying for the entirety of the morning, the afternoon. I appreciate it's been a long agenda. I think everyone's pretty straight with that, so thank you all. I'm concerned in this respect, no appraisal of the impact of the setting of Grade 1 listed St Peter and St Paul's Church directly opposite is present. This is significant and you know it should be within the heritage appraisal and in my view is material. I also agree with Tim. I cannot agree windows being in poor state of maintenance are all a good enough reason to replace them with a different material entirely in this setting. It's more appropriate in others, of course. The building is specifically mentioned in the conservation area appraisal, our conservation area appraisal, as is the fenestration. So approval would be, in my view, another case where the appraisal and its value has been overlooked. On the design, I feel the material chosen relates poorly to the location and the host building. UPVC is brighter than timber. It does contrast in locations such as these on assets, despite what is said about timber effects, etc. We have previously objected to comparable applications, 28 High Street, also opposite the church, and 14 Mount Street, and these refusals were upheld at appeal. So the inspectorate could not support that the choice of the material in the conservation area was justified among other reasons. The Town Council, I believe, have rightly mentioned policy EN8. I have mentioned again today EM4, as I feel the design must be suitable for the context within which the host building is present. That's what I'd say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could you read out Andreas Yassini's statement, please? Yeah. Okay. So these are the comments from Councillor Andreas Yassini. He said, I know this area well and would like to emphasise that each application should be looked at in its own individual scenario, but therefore shouldn't waver in our focus. He says, I'd like to draw your attention to these observations. The current windows are in very poor condition and in need of repair and replacement. 6 of the windows are ordinary sash design, and the 7th, labelled as W04, is not a sash because it needed access to a small balcony. He says, I would also like to highlight that proposed materials will be heritage white wood grain effect UPVC frames that will match the existing. Therefore, he says, concerning continuity and appearance, the proposed units will also match the specification of those used on the 2nd floor flat approved under application 210968. He says, even though it was a different application, in this case, it is one of the same buildings. It will actually enhance the overall look. Says this application will not have any impact on privacy because there are mere replacements for the existing structure that would not impact residential amenity and would comply with policy EN4. Andrew Yassini says, I feel that these are important points to have in mind, therefore would like to go with the officer's recommendation of approval. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been serving this council. I think I'm the most long-standing person in the room at the moment, but obviously, probably even the officers as well. Perhaps not Jeff. I remember these coming up time and time and time again. And in each occasion, we have always supported the conservationists of Cromer Town by refusing them. And I do think it's very important that we continue to do so, and looking at the use of plastic. We've got to get away from it. We've declared a climate emergency, and plastic is one of the worst things that we can possibly have. So I will propose that this is refused.
We have to deal with the document in front of us, of course. That's all.
They describe as sash windows, but is the functionality a sash, or is it the sort of window where it opens out like that, in which case it's going to look rather out of place? And I think you normally take the ground floor and the first floor together as a unit rather than the first and the second, because you're walking along the street. You're not going to look all the way up to the second floor and say, oh, look, that's plastic. I wish the rest of it was plastic. You should be looking at first and ground, and I bet you the ground floor isn't plastic. So I'm on Angie. I'll be following Councillor Fitzgerald on this.
I would presume, Colin, that these are separate leaseholders. So all we're doing in this case is unifying the frontage. Councillor Seaboard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just reading through the report from Heritage, and I find it really bizarre that they're saying it's okay to have plastic windows on the second floor. Surely the job of Heritage would be to try and protect the area rather than allow plastic. I'm surprised they've actually gone down that route of approving it. I'm looking at this building, and saying that people don't often look up, I'm sorry, but I think you would look up, because you look at the architecture of the building. And I think by putting plastic windows in, even though they are sash, it's detrimental to the building. I think for a little bit of extra money and maintenance, I think they should be going for the wood type of windows and not plastic, because as everyone's clearly aware, plastic is not good for anybody. And in an area of conservation such as this, I think it's dreadful that we should even be considering it. But that's my point. Thank you.
Nigel.
Yeah, I'd normally be thinking, well, you know, replacement with double glazing or something like that is good for the environment. But actually, as I've been listening to other people, other members speak on this subject, I kind of thinking that they have a point about the plastic. And if there are viable opportunities, such as wood, which is a good insulator in itself. Yeah, I'm struggling here, you know, as portfolio holder for climate change, to approve an application that recommends the use of plastic. So I'll join Angie and
Would
Councillor
of
Halliday.
course would pose maintenance problems in that location, so understandable where they're coming from, but we disagree, Angie. Colin, would you just like to comment on any benefits of unifying the top floor and the middle floor with essentially the same design of windows, same materials? The benefit.
Yeah, I mean, there's not an awful lot to say on that point. I think the conservation officer has recognised, as officers are recognised, that we have had a previous approval for plastic on the second floor. This proposal merely replicates that on the first floor, so therefore there is in essence a small benefit of unifying the appearance of the first and second floors rather than having different types. So that's where that point is coming from.
Yeah. To say, it would seem somewhat obtuse to the applicant that we very recently agreed UPVC in the upper floor. We were to go the other way this time. It's a rather illogical approach. Whether we did it on a different building, different application was another matter, but I'm referring to this particular case. Oh, Jeff.
I think that's quite an astute observation, Chair. I think whilst I tend to agree with the points made about UPVC, we should be looking for timber where we can. I think given the context of this situation, we've granted permission for plastic windows on the second floor already. If we insist on timber here, whilst I understand the merits of doing so, actually by having a timber window then again matched against the second floor of UPVC, you could actually create an awkward context between those two different materials. And actually by having them both in the same, you'll provide that unity that actually will be less detracting from the ground floor. That would be my sort of view on that. Obviously the conservation officers considered very carefully the the need to preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. And they've come to a view that actually there's no sustainable objection here. So again, it's one of those things where you have to weigh those different issues up. But in our view, we think this is something that we should be approving as a committee.
Thank you. Could I just follow that up? So would you be hinting that perhaps in the design code that's under development, we take a view against UPVC in future? Certainly something I think we ought to be debating. And no doubt planning policy can have a look at it.
Chairman, you need to look at the merits of each case. And it may be that in certain circumstances, appropriate forms of UPVC windows are appropriate. That's what we have here. It is extremely worrying that we cannot consider the environmental issues more widely here. We can't. We're looking at matters of design and the impact on the conservation area. Those are the principal matters of weight here. We are in a situation where, wherever possible, we'll negotiate for the best available alternatives. In this instance, we are dealing with a considered approach which follows a similar approach, which I believe may even have been a committee decision. I'm just checking the records we have of the flat at the second floor. So from my point of view, you should not issue broad policies which are predetermination of an application. It's the same as saying you would oppose all wind turbines. You can't necessarily say in a planning policy that you should be opposing all UPVC windows, because that equates to a form of predetermination. You need to look at the issues that relate to the heritage assets that are involved.
No, I wasn't suggesting that we should be against UPVC per se, merely that we should have a clear strategy as to where and when wood is appropriate, UPVC is appropriate, so applicants can be clear as to what might or might be acceptable. That's a prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just take it from what the head of planning has just said then, that we're not sort of hamstrung by following the precedent on the second floor by insisting that we treat the first floor differently and we use alternative materials to the ones used on the second floor. And therefore, if we refuse this application on appeal, we wouldn't be criticised unduly by the inspector in that case for going down that path. The other thing that is I notice is perhaps conspicuous by its absence as well is what the previous conservation area appraisal for Caravan actually said. I'm taking it sort of as read that the submission from the conservation and design team is reflecting what's in the conservation area appraisal, but there's actually nothing in the report that sets out what the appraisal says, which I think would have been helpful. But I am struggling with this. It's a difficult one.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is finely balanced. I'm drawn to page 43, second paragraph, and it says, that said, it is often difficult in practice to substantiate an objection in principle to the use of plastic windows in an unlisted building where there is a precedent for the use of UPVC windows. Now, this building already has plastic, etc. And I think to force another type of design, however desirable, on this building would create another precedent, because you'd have two lines, two floors right in the middle of town. I think they've tried to disguise the fact that they would be plastic, although it would be easily seen by using timber effect. I think the officer's got it right on this one. Sadly, not for the officer, but for the conditions of the conservation area. And I think we could find ourselves in quite a bit of trouble with other applications of the same ilk. And I do remember one that came, I think last year, where it was a house where they already had plastic upstairs, and something came forward. They wanted plastic downstairs, and in the end, it was agreed that we should allow that to be done. I think we're in that situation here. I think the officer, for their own benefit, And for us, sadly, has got it right. And I think we should go with it and get it done out of the way in the quickest possible fashion. Thank you.
So you are proposing.
If I propose we accept the officer's recommendation reluctantly.
It sort of helps to move us forward. Okay, Councillor Toy, then we'll move to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to pick up on a few points that have been said by others. Councillor Mancini-Boyle, yes, that you do look up. Councillor Halliday, that you use the first and second floor. And actually using Street View is lovely. We can use this tech nowadays. That actually it is very different, this floor. It's got bay windows and you will see it from the street, whereas the one that has the plastic windows sits back. So they are very different and we can treat them different and we can take each case on its merits. And we have wooden windows in a building that's been mentioned in the conservation area, above a very distinctive wooden front, although I'm not sure how the purple colour of it matches within the conservation area. However, that's perhaps another debate. But you know, we have a very distinctive wooden front with the wooden bays above. And the fact that the top floor would be different if that was left as plastic, I don't think comes into it. That they are very distinctly different. So actually, again today, I'm afraid I must go against the officer's recommendation.
Right, we have a proposal. Do I have a seconder? Yes, I'll second from the chair to enable us to progress. We will vote then on the recommendation for approval. I suspect we'll be carrying on a little bit.
Councillor Adams, are you excusing yourself from this vote? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Against.
Councillor Holiday.
Against.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Toy.
Against.
Councillor Varley.
For.
So that's 5, 4 and 6 against.
Here we go again. Never known a day like it. Okay, we need therefore proposal for refusal and the grounds upon which that refusal is being made. Who wants to have a go at that? That's Holiday.
I'll propose refusal.
Yeah, could you give me the grounds for that refusal?
I think on grounds of damage to heritage assets, that's EN 8, which hasn't been, is that correct? Hasn't been sufficiently stressed. EN and EN 1 and EN 4. Is that correct?
Is that acceptable?
Chairman, you're looking at policies that do relate to design and heritage, and I'll go back to EN1. I think that's a generic policy, just let me confirm. EN1 relates to the character of the Norfolk coast area of outstanding natural beauty in the Broads. I would suggest that is not necessarily relevant. I think you're dealing with the matters of EN4 and EN8, if you take my advice, Chairman, but that will be a matter of members' discussion.
Yes, sir.
Happy with that.
It's, just following on from what Dr. Ralston just said, we're back to this issue of harm in the conservation area and looking at the NPPF and weighing the public benefits of that harm against. So you'd have to come to a conclusion that harm is resulting from this proposal, from the use of that particular material. Harm would result on the character and appearance of the conservation area, and that the public benefits do not outweigh that particular harm. That's kind of where I'd be looking at that, and obviously reference to EN4 as well, if you're looking for particular policies in the local plan. But there's two aspects of this. There's the local plan policies, but also the statutory responsibilities under the Conservation Areas Act.
Okay, so you're suggesting that it would create less and substantial harm were it to be UPVC. That's a conservation area.
Well, that's in effect what you're saying, isn't it?
Brain's failing at this time of the day.
That's in effect what the committee is saying by saying that they have concerns about the material. They're in effect saying that there is harm to the character and appearance of the conservation area by the use of this particular material. And by definition, in coming to your view, you must have assumed that there are no public benefits that outweigh that harm. Just following around on the arguments that have been made in committee.
Thank you. We'll come back to you in a moment, Angie.
Yeah, thank you,
No.
Mr. Chairman.
Now, can I let Noel just his legal view on this first?
Sorry.
I'd only remind members once more of the law, the statutory duty under section 72 of Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act in determining applications in relation to a conservation area to require special attention to be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of that area. Obviously, if it doesn't preserve, that would be in breach of that legal duty.
What he said.
What he
No, I'm looking at page 43 in terms of heritage, the second and third paragraphs. Obviously, there's a difference of opinion, but I believe it does have substantial harm to the conservation area, and therefore I'm more than happy to second Councillor Holliday's proposal.
Okay, thank you. I think we have sufficient reasons. That has made sense of it.
Yep, no problem. So
just to be clear on what we are.
okay, so voting to refuse, Councillor Brown. Councillor Fitzgerald.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Heinrich.
Against.
Councillor Kershaw.
Against.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Toy.
For.
Councillor Varley.
Against.
So it's 6 in favour and 5 against.
So that application is therefore refused.
Mr. Chairman, just a footnote to that. I think there has been some mention of some training for members on the issue of windows and their character in conservation areas. So I'm not sure whether either our two esteemed officers present here have any thoughts or anything to offer on that. Because this has been repeatedly, well, it seems to crop up repeatedly in Cromer in particular. We've had a number of applications come to this committee recently. It might just help if we had some guidance, some training on it.
Chairman, the members have just shown that they can make decisions on windows in matters of fine judgment.
With more
I think
difficulty,
the officer's suggestion was that we have an issue arising from the Cromer Conservation Area Review, and it was an issue to discuss directly with Cromer Town Council, the matters that arose in that issue and the issues that surround Article 4. If members want to have some specific updating or briefing on windows, conservation areas, listed buildings and the appropriateness of materials, we'll be happy to provide that. I will take a lead from the portfolio holders meetings as to the issues that members want to discuss. I'm sorry to cross swords. I don't normally disagree, but I think the officer's suggestion was that we would seek to meet with Cromer Town Council, because this does seem to be, as you've heard today, a matter of significant concern for the Town Council, and it would be useful to look at those issues that arose through the Conservation Area Review directly with the CD&L team.
Thank you. That can be taken to other forums. Right, we have 2 items left, so we can be as brief as possible with those. It's approaching half
Our
past
performance
one.
as read, Chairman. I'm happy to move on that and take questions.
Item 15, Officer Horizon. So item 15, page 51, the performance management. My page, where it is. Crunch earlier.
Move on to the appeals then, Chairman.
You have a question on that one?
No, just it'd be wrong for me to sit here as portfolio holder and not thank officers for the continued work that they put in to drive the numbers to the place they have. I appreciate the efforts that have gone on, and I think we should all acknowledge that it has been a supreme effort. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, I think that's thanks from all of us.
I'll make sure the officers concerned hear that message. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, appeals.
I would normally say as read, Chairman, I just need to draw attention to one particular appeal in Fakenham, which is in the written representation section. First page, Fakenham PO/20/0887, land at Barons Meadow, Barons Lane, Fakenham. This was a written representations appeal, which was determined and has been dismissed. And in that dismissal, the planning inspector considered the district council had a 5-year housing land supply. You'll hear that phrase again as we go forward, Chairman. Another item actually updates, I think, on all the hearings that we have on the first page, Chairman. So Klein Ecstasy, Arcady, we are now confirmed as an appeal hearing that will sit in June with the planning inspectorate on the enforcement notice for this matter. I can also update members, Chairman, that we will be receiving amended plans from the applicant on his 2 current applications that seek to remediate the building and secure a historic permission, and those plans should be received in February. My expectation is members, I'll report to you in March, all being well. I want to make sure we give the community a full consultation on any revised plans at Arcady. Second matter, Chairman, the hearing appeal at Kelling is to be heard as a remote hearing, and that will take place on the 1st and 2nd of February as your report. If any members wish to attend, please contact me or the appeals clerk, and we'll be happy to give you the joining details for that hearing on the 1st and 2nd. Finally, members, on the hearing at Ryborough, we have an enforcement appeal requiring removal of unauthorised works. That appeal has now been deferred and will be held in March and will be held as an appeal in person. The appellant suggested to the planning inspectorate that they had a number of people who wanted to come and speak on his behalf and should be heard in a formal hearing, and we are now taking that as a deferral of date and will be hearing it in March. I'll be pleased to take any questions on those items or indeed any others on the appeal pages. Thank you, Chair.
Members have any questions? Okay. We seem to have reached that point then. We have no private business, so no need to exclude press and public, not was any left. No urgent exempt business, other matters. So I declare the meeting closed at 1:28 in the afternoon.